Shadow Slave, Chapter 201 to 201, Lord of the Dead. 983 words. The giant underground chamber was circular in shape and a immense as grand hall of the bright castle. Its walls were built out of the same grey stone slabs as mighty walls of the dark city, but unlike them, the walls of the chamber were covered with whispering streams of cold, nebulous black water. In the center of it, a vast mountain of human bones rose from the ground, reaching almost halfway to the distant ceiling. Thousands, no, hundreds of thousands of people must have perished to create it. With a harrowing realization, Sunny finally understood where the people who built the ancient city and the impregnable wall surrounding it had disappeared to. They were all here, piled onto each other in this vile monument of death. This horrid dark chamber was their final resting place. An old memory suddenly surfaced in his mind. Back beneath the branches of the soul tree, Cassie had seen a vision of a blood-soaked hill formed from countless corpses. On top of it, a tiny black seed was floating in a pool of blood. Was there a similar mountain of bones hiding under the soil of the ashen barrow? Was that how the soul devourer had been born? Sunny shifted his gaze, only now noticing the veins of crimson coral growing from the harrowing hill of white bones, almost like muscle tissue of some colossal creature. Following the coral pillars up, he finally saw that the dome of the immense chamber was broken, with pale sunlight streaming through the breach and falling on the ghastly visage below. A giant stone hand was reaching down through the broken dome, its palm open, asked how trying to caress the mountain formed from the bones of those people who had once populated this dark, forsaken land. Looking at the stone hand, Sunny suddenly realized where they were. The vast underground chamber was situated directly underneath the headless statue of the graceful woman who had once saved them from drowning in the black waters of the cursed sea. One of her hands was raised toward the heavens, as if trying to embrace them. The other had broken off and fell down thousands of years ago, lying in the mud at the base of the giant statue. Reaching into the depths of hell, that was the hand Sunny was looking at right now. It was also their way out of here. Doofus, wake up, brought back to reality by Fiziel. He shuddered and looked around with a new understanding. So the exit the huntress had told them about was the breach in the dome of the underground chamber. With Kai's aspect ability and the help of the golden rope, escaping through it was not going to be a problem. But, where was this Lord of the Dead that she had mentioned? From Effie's colorful description, Sunny had expected to see a giant monster slumbering in the heart of the catacombs. If Mori served, her exact words were, a big fat bastard of a nightmare creature. But he couldn't see anything, unless, his eyes narrowed, and just at that moment, the mountain of bones suddenly moved. When the mountain moved, everything suddenly made sense. At first, Sunny thought that the unknown creature was sleeping inside the ghastly hill of bones. But then he realized that no, it wasn't. The mountain itself was the nightmare creature. This was the Lord of the Dead. Each of the countless bones piled on top of each other in the underground chamber was a part of its body. For a moment, Sunny was paralyzed by fear. Fat bastard, that is what you call a fat bastard. But then, the disparate pieces of information clicked in his mind, assembling into a vivid chain of cause and effect. Of course, why didn't I realize sooner? The mountain of bones, the horde of immortal skeletons, the Lord of the Dead, evil connected. The nightmare creature in front of him was a fallen tyrant. Tyrants were a fifth step in the evolution of nightmare creatures, and the name of that class was not coincidental. The fifth step represented rule and authority. Thatsy the blind monstrosity he had faced on the slopes of the Black Mountain was named Aking, and Thatsy the abomination in front of him was named Alord. Classes differed from each other in terms of pure might, but most of the distinction between them was caused by a more fundamental reason. Higher classes possessed characteristics that, while not directly affecting the quantity of their power, gave it a qualitative change. For example, wild beasts were mindless, demons and those above them were intelligent. Thatsy a demon, even IFITWAS only slightly stronger than a monster, was in fact 10 times more dangerous. The characteristic of the tyrant class was that these nightmare creatures were capable of creating and controlling large amounts of lesser creatures. The Mountain King's larva that Sunny had slain during his first trial, which was born when a tiny worm living inside the Mountain King's body entered the corpse of a slave, was one such lesser creature. However, this power had its limitations. The minions created by it couldn't be of the same rank as it. Thatsy the larva was a dormant beast, while Mountain King itself was awakened. Similarly, while the skeletons that the cohort had faced were awakened, they had to be created by a fallen tyrant. And something told Sunny that their immortality was tied to the Lord of the Dead, too. If someone wanted to destroy the undead army, they would have to destroy the abominable bone colossus first. Said colossus, meanwhile, was slowly waking up right in front of Sunny. And if when itdid, damnation, nervously gripping the midnight shard, he glanced at Nephis. The golden rope was already in her hands, and she was passing it Okai. Before the beautiful archer could take it, though, the mountainous creature suddenly rippled. A moment later, a twisted pillar of bones shot from its body, flying in your direction with the force of Fasige Ram. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave, Chapter 202 to 202, Risk and Reward. 1048 words. Nephis and Kai dove away, and the massive pillar of bone shot past them. Before the thunderous sound OFIT crashing against the wall of the chamber even reached Sunny Shars, the pillar was already moving, whipping sideways with tremendous force. Luckily, Han and Cassie were behind it, but Effie and Castor were not. Both of them reacted with admirable speed and fell to the ground, allowing the terrifying limb of the gargantuan creature to fly above their heads. Rising from the stone floor, the huntress screamed. It's just thrashing in its sleep. Move, we need to get out of here before the bastard wakes up. Cursing, Sunny dismissed the midnight shard and faced the mountain of bones, trying to predict its next move. He was beginning to understand how Effie's original hunting party had perished in the catacombs. Asword wouldn't be of any use in this situation. The Lord of the Dead was slowly coming to its senses. The bones constituting its repulsive body moved and rippled, unfurling from within the white mass like giant, twisting limbs. It seemed to be slowly turning from a shapeless hill into some semblance of a creature. What shape that creature would assume once it fully awoke, Sunny didn't want to talk now. Another twisting pillar, limb, suddenly shot from the mass of bones, blindly striking at the empty space behind the giant abomination. Sunny gritted his teeth, his ears ringing from the thunderclap of its impact against the wall. What followed was a deafening noise of thousands of fancy ant bones scraping against weathered stone. The massive pillar whipped left and right, then fell to the ground and slowly retreated back inside the body of the Lord of the Dead. Meanwhile, Neffys was back at her feet. Dashing toward Kai, she pushed one end of the golden rope into his hands and pointed to the breach in the dome of the chamber. In the next moment, the archer soared into the air, flying Tohi's destination with incredible speed. With a terrifying scraping sound, the whole white mountain rippled once again, and several devastating pillars of bone shot to intercept him. However, Sunny had no time to check on Kai, because the Lord of the Dead had extended 2 more limbs in his direction. Diving under the first one, Sunny felt a wave off at it air rush past him. Knowing that he only had a second left to live, Heathen strained his muscles and jumped with all his shadow-augmented might. Sunny's body flew several meters into the air, avoiding the rushing bone tentacle only by a few centimeters. Landing a gnarl, Sunny cursed and got back Tohi's feet. What kind of an infernal jumping rope game is this? The Lord of the Dead was slowly coming to its senses. More bone tentacles appeared from the mass of corpses, each moving with growing precision. But Kai was already standing on the palm of the giant stone hand, the golden rope looped around one of its fingers. Cassie was the first one to climb up. With the flying rapier loyally hovering over her shoulder, the blind girl effortlessly moved up the rope, reaching the distant ceiling of the underground chamber less than 10 seconds later. It was easy to forget that she had absorbed as much soul essence as rest of them. Her delicate arms hid much more power than one would assume. However, back on the ground, those seconds were aerial hell. The mountainous creature was waking up, making it hard for the rest of them to stay away from its blindly thrashing limbs. They needed to get out of here fast. Effie was the next one to take the rope. The huntress practically flew up, pushing herself with agility and Herculean strength worthy of fantasy and hero. Then, it was Castor's turn. Effortlessly dodging a pillar of bone with his incredible speed, the legacy grabbed the rope, and turned into a barely visible blur. A second later, he was already landing on the giant stone palm. Neffys and Sunny were the only ones left in the reach of the fallen tyrant. Glancing at Sunny, Changing Star yelled, "Your turn." However, Sunny did not respond. His eyes were fixed on the base of the gargantuan abomination, where, amidst the ancient bones, a weak golden glow emanated from a small, partially concealed object. Sunny lingered for a moment, his thoughts moving with incredible speed. Heck knew that he was a greedy person by nature, and one cursed with insatiable curiosity, too. However, first and foremost, he was someone who put a tremendous amount of value on his own survival. That's he. Right now, his reasoning was cold and sober. It was a question of risk and reward, as well as ability. Would Hebel reach the object shining with the light of divinity and come back alive, or not? A second later, he looked at Neffys and answered, "You go, I'll just behind you, ... It would be shame to go through all of this and not receive anything in return." He had Totri. With that, Sunny turned around and dashed toward the Lord of the Dead. The decision was made, and now all that was left was to execute it. Summoning the prowling thorn, he threw the mountain of bones. Of course, Sunny didn't top-toe the tyrant. He just wanted to lodge the kunai in its body. Just as throwing dagger pierced the mass of bones, a white limb suddenly shot in his direction, obstructing everything with its repulsive expanse. Commanding the invisible string to contract, Sunny jumped high into the air and flew forward as how launched from a cannon. Landing on the other side of the pillar, just a few steps away from the unencompassable mass of bones, he gritted his teeth. And then thrust his hand inside the fallen tyrant's body. A moment later, his fist closed around the concealed object, and with some effort, Sunny pulled it out in the clatter of breaking bones. A sharp pain pierced his forearm. Opening his fist, he saw a small, intricate iron key. It looked almost ordinary, if not for the ethereal golden glow emanating from within it. In the next moment, Sunny suddenly staggered, feeling a wave of weakness washed over his body. Rotating his forearm, he stared blankly at it for a split second, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. And when headed, his eyes widened in terror. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 203-203, Corpse Eater. 1153 words. Glistening in the dim twilight of the underground chamber, an enormous leech was attached to Tohi's forearm. The creature was about a meter long, its slimy skin slightly translucent and red as reed blood. It was indescribably repulsive. What a source, though, was that its sucker had effortlessly broken through the leather embrace of the puppeteer's shroud and sunk deep into Sunny's arm, splitting open his skin and muscles. Currently, the leech was gorging on his blood, its belly slowly ballooning as crimson fluid rushed into it with frightening speed. With a sense of disgust and horror, Sunny slammed his fist into the spongy flesh of the revolting monster. Augmented with the power of shadows, his punch was powerful enough to easily break a human skull. The abhorrent slug, however, did not even react to it. It just continued sucking out his blood. All Sunny achieved was sending a wave of pain rolling through his body. Not good. Instantly summoning the midnight shard, he enhanced its edge with the help of the shadow and hacked at the leech, putting all his strength behind the strike. The blade of the tachi was as sharp as Sarazar, and with the augmentation provided by shadow, it slid helplessly off the leech's skin, not leaving even a scratch on it. The slug wasn't affected at all. It was still drinking his blood, consuming a dangerous amount of it with each second. Sunny stared at the disgusting creature, dumbfounded. His body was already starting to suffer from blood loss, a sickening weakness slowly spreading through it. There wasn't much time left until it would cause him to lose consciousness. And then, inevitably, die. Think. The leech had broken through his Tier 5 awakened armor without any effort. It was immune to the damage done by the midnight shard, which had never failed to cut down any monster he faced before. This could only mean one thing. The damn slug was a fallen beast. Sunny blinked in disbelief. That thing is a fallen one. Are you kidding me? If this was true, then nothing he could do would harm the leech. Maybe if he was at the very peak of his rank, there would be chance. But with his core mostly empty and his aspect ability focused on versatility as opposed to pure might, like Effie's, there was none. The gap between their ranks was just too wide. Stone Saint could probably wound it, but it would take several seconds for the taciturn monster to appear and take action. Seconds that Sunny didn't have. By the time she was able to do anything, he would already be dead, either sucked dry by the abominable slug or crushed to death by the Lord of the Dead. That left Sunny with only one option. If he couldn't get rid of the leech, he was going to have to cut off his arm. Maybe Neffys would be able to grow him a new one. Or not. In any case, he had to wait in order to survive. Raising the tachi over his head, Sunny gritted his teeth and hesitated for a moment. Despite understanding that this was the only way, he was still struggling with the idea of crippling himself so terribly. Didn't think, if you want to live, just do it. With a desperate resolve, he forcefully brought the midnight shard down, but then stopped it last second. The sharp blade hovered mere centimeters away from his skin. This was not due to the lack of determination, but because Sunny noticed a subtle change happening to the leech. Its belly, which had been expanding rapidly as his blood filled it, stopped ballooning at some point. Now, strange spasms were running through it. What the? In the next moment, the vile creature suddenly convulsed. Letting go of his arm, it dropped to the ground and writhed in agony. Through the translucent film of its skin, Sunny could see the innards of the giant slug bursting open. It was asked how it was being torn from within by some invisible force. No, not a force, it was being killed by his blood. The damn leech got poisoned by it. It seemed that blood weave was far more odd and tenacious of an attribute than he had thought. A second later, the whole body of the fallen beast simply ruptured, spilling blood everywhere. Sunny stared at it with a blank expression. Bringing him out of the daze, the voice of the spell whispered. You have slain a fallen beast, corpse eater. Your shadow grows stronger. Ha, you have received a memory. Ash's eyes grew wide. Sunny shook off his astonishment and lunged forward. He still had to escape from this damn place. Grabbing the bloodied soul shard from the eviscerated remains of the abominable leech, he turned around and sprinted to the golden rope. Dodging a bone tentacle that burst from the body of the gargantuan tyrant to persuade him, Sunny rolled on the ground, jumped over apple of broken bones, and finally reached his destination. As soon as Asha grabbed the rope, it began contracting, bringing him out of the underground chamber. When Sunny was nearly reaching the hand of the stone goddess, a deafening roar thundered from below, washing over his body in an almost palpable wave. The Lord of the Dead was finally awake, but it was already too late. His prey had escaped. Climbing out of the mud, Sunny fell to his knees, and then tiredly lowered himself to the ground. The breath was escaping from his lungs with laborious, raspy sounds. Weak, he felt so weak, and tired, but it was so good to see the sun again. The wounds he had received in the catacombs had finally caught up with Sunny. With adrenaline gone, he was now in nausea of pain. A quiet groan escaped from his lips. That was not fun. While Sunny was contemplating this, a shadow fell over him. Looking up, he saw Neffy's glaring at them with a dark expression. She was bloodied and battered, with a deep frown contorting the graceful lines off her usually calm face. Quote. What? Kneeling beside Sunny, Changing Star grimaced and said, Are you insane? Why did you do that? He tried to chuckle, but ended up twisting in an excruciating coughing fit. When Sunny was finally able to breathe again, he said weakly, Yes, no, maybe, I don't know, I just saw something shiny. With that, he opened his fist and showed Changing Star the glowing crystal of the ascended soul shard he had scavenged from the corpse of the vile blood-sucking leech. She stared at it for a few moments, and then sighed. Without saying anything else, Neffys placed her cool hands on his chest and closed her eyes. A moment later, the purifying white flame spread through his body like a warm embrace, repairing any damage done to it. Even knowing how much pain this cost her, Sunny couldn't help but be happy to feel its touch again. Soon, his pain disappeared. With his head cleared of the fog, he realized that they had done it. They had successfully escaped the Dark City. Who knew it would be so hard? Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 204 to 204, Mysterious Key. 1,173 words. A while later, they were resting in the shadow of the giant statue. Every member of the cohort looked nothing short of terrible, however, beneath the bloodied slots and broken armor, their bodies were whole and sound. Changing Star had healed them all, and now, she was the only one who was weak and exhausted. Using the white flame so much had taken a heavy toll on her. Sitting in the mud, Sunny raised his head and looked at the giant statue of the faceless woman. She was just like the last time he had seen her, slender and graceful, with her light-flowing robe rippling in the wind, asked how made out of actual fabric and not hard stone. The statue was tilted slightly to the side, with its one remaining hand reaching high into the sky. A long time ago, on the night of their harrowing escape from the Ashen Barrow, Sunny, Cassie and Neffys had taken shelter in her palm. It was from its height that he had first seen the walls of the Dark City. Looking down, Sunny stared at the other hand of the giant statue, which had broken off a long time ago and fell down, crushing through the dome of the underground chamber. With ASIGH, he closed his eyes and thought. Thank you for saving us again. Then, his face darkened. Remembering the events that had transpired in the catacombs, Sunny felt his good mood evaporating. Although he had found the answer to one of the mysteries that had been plaguing him for a while now, he was unhappy about it. The fate of the inhabitants of the ancient city had always been something that Sunny was very curious about. A sonomature explorer who spent most of his free time studying the ruins of the Dark City, he was familiar with subtle details of their culture more than most. Learning about the mundane facts of their lives was somewhat of a passion of his. He had known that the history of this ancient civilization ended in tragedy, of course. A cataclysmic disaster had destroyed it, turning the once prosperous land into the desolate hell it was today. But against all logic, Sunny still hoped that these people had somehow managed to survive. Perhaps they had migrated somewhere, leaving the ruins of their city behind. But now Heck knew that it wasn't so. All of them were right there below him, buried forever in a damp underground chamber, piled onto each other high enough to form a ghastly mountain of bones. More than that, their remains had been soaked in the cursed waters of the Dark Sea and turned into a vessel for the soul of Abel Nightmare creature. There were a lot of questions about the fate of these people still lingering in his mind. How did they end up in that dark chamber? Had they died there, or had their bodies been brought there by someone, or something, later? How was the Lord of the Dead born? Was its inception the same as that of the Soul Devourer? But he didn't really want to know the answers anymore. He felt that learning them would only break his heart. With ASIGH, Sunny decided to distract himself from these depressing thoughts with something uplifting and summoned the runes. One cluster, in particular, interested him the most. Shadow Fragments, 322 1,000ths. He had received 4 fragments for killing the Corpse Eater, even though the manner of its death was rather peculiar. Having now killed nightmare creatures of the awakened, fallen, and great ranks, Sunny could surmise that his initial theory was right. The spell gave him double the fragments for killing enemies of higher ranks, according to the number of soul cores they possessed. An awakened creature would land him 2 fragments for each core, a fallen one 4, and a grade 1 16. It was easy to guess that killing a dormant creature, which was equal to him in terms of rank, would result in 1 fragment per core, while killing a corrupted one would result in 8. Made sense. It was the same as absorbing soul shards, with the difference being that shadow fragments entered his core at the moment of the kill and without making a distinction between nightmare creatures and humans. Looking up, He glanced at the list of his memories. Memories: Silver Belt, Puppeteer's Shroud, Midnight Shard, Ordinary Rock, Prowling Thorn, Endless Spring, Blood Arrow. The last one was new. Slightly intrigued, Sunny read its description. Memory: Blood Arrow. Memory rank: Ascended. Memory tier: I. Memory type: Weapon. Memory description: A debt of blood must be paid in blood. Memory enchantments: Rain of Blood Restitution. Enchantment description: The arrows are created from the wielder blood, and Asic can rain on the enemies for as long as Archer has any left in their veins. Enchantment description: If the arrow finds its mark, it will drink the blood of the prey and restore that which had been taken from the archer. If it misses, the archer blood will bellows forever. Creepy. Since Sunny didn't know how to say BOW, this memory was useless to him. Which was a real shame, because it was the first ascended one he had ever received. Memories of that rank were extremely rare on the Forgotten Shore. Heck would either feed it to the Stone Saint for a couple of shadow fragments, or... Sunny glanced at Kai and frowned, lost in thought. While the blood arrow was of Naustohim, it would be a real boon for the charming archer. With Edith's disposal, he wouldn't have to carry Aquiver with him, not to mention that each shot he made would be much more devastating. As long as Kai didn't miss, of course. If it'd miss, he would be sacrificing his blood for nothing. Transferring the blood arrow to Kai would have made the cohort much stronger. But Sunny wasn't so that he was ready to give Yuffie's first and only ascended memory. Not for free, at least. Torn, Hetty's missed the runes and decided to think about it later. In other news, the blood we've had revealed a new trait. Turns out, Sunny's blood was poisonous, or rather, damaging to anyone who ingested it. At least it seemed that way from the manner of Corpse Eater's death. He would have to experiment to find out more later. Or not. Honestly, Sunny didn't even know how one would go about checking something like that, and wasn't particularly eager to find out. After dismissing the runes, Sunny finally decided to take a look at the mysterious key. Subtly glancing around, He furtively took it out from beneath the embrace of the Puppeteer's Shroud, where he had hidden Idolier. The intricate iron key lay on his palm, glowing with a pale golden light. The light of divinity. Sunny had no idea what the key was supposed to be. He had taken an insane risk and almost died to get it. Was it worth it? Honestly, a sensor. But deep down, Sunny felt that it was. For some reason, he sensed that the small iron key would turn out to be extremely important to him. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 205 to 205. Journey to the South. 1015 words. Sadly, the cohort did not get a lot of time to rest. Despite the fact that it wasn't even noon yet, they had a lot of ground to cover before sunset. The plan they had made at the start of the day was to leave the Dark City from the south by climbing the wall near the grandiose main gates and then travel through the labyrinth to the next safe height, which was about 10 kilometers away. However, due to the fact that they had ended up in the catacombs instead and had to escape through the chamber belonging to the Lord of the Dead, the party was now to the east of the ruins, near the beautiful statue of the Faceless Woman. Not only did they have to circle around the city now, but there was also less time to reach safety before the flood of darkness devoured the Forgotten Shore once again. Standing upon a chorus of disappointed groans, the cohort assumed the marching formation and set out south. Walking through the mud of the colossal crater was not easy, but for the time being, they had no other choice, unless they wanted to scale the monumental stone wall and return to the Dark City, of course. Luckily, with both Sunny's Shadow and Kai scouting the way ahead, they didn't have to worry about being ambushed by monsters. So, for the time being, the only thing the party had to struggle with was moving their feet through the wet dirt. The monotonous silence was broken only by laborious breathing and slurping of mud. A while later, the impregnable and seemingly endless gray wall that loomed some distance away and above them slowly twisted, drifting away from the edge of the crater. They were finally leaving the cursed ruins behind. Turning around, Sunny looked back and studied the site of the city that had been his whole world for these past 4, almost 5 months. Far away, the floor of the gargantuan crater sharply rose, forming a tall slope. On it stood the unassailable wall of polished gray stone, firm and unyielding despite the thousands of years that had passed since the demise of its creators. From where he stood, Sunny could see the flood of crimson coral swelling out its base, sharp blades powerlessly scraping against the cold stone in hopeless attempts to find purchase. It looked as how the city was being besieged by the land itself. If it knew what awaits inside, the labyrinth would be trying to escape as far as possible from that damned place instead. With ASIGH, Sunny looked up and noticed a lone human figure standing on the wall, watching them disappear into the distance. That figure was crooked and dark, emanating a cold feeling of foreboding. A few moments later, it turned away and disappeared from view. Harus had chosen to return to the bright castle. Trying not to shiver, Sunny lingered for a few seconds, and then hurried to catch up with the group. They were safe from him, at least. For now, because the crater was too big, the bend OFIT's edge was almost imperceptible. Only by looking far into the distance could one say that it was actually curved. Because of this, the cohort could have continued traveling through the crater for a long time without having to move farther away from the goal of Shorny, which lay to the southwest of their current position. However, they had to leave the crater and return to the labyrinth sooner or later, not only to escape the black water, but also because there was nothing to hide behind on this vast muddy plain. Even if flying nightmare creature decided to attack them from above, the cohort would have no defense against it. The labyrinth, while hiding its own fair share of terrifying threats, at least offered some measure of protection. Fatsy, at some point, Neffys led the party to the sharp slope of the crater, and the 6 of them climbed out of it. With the help of Kai and the trusty golden rope, the task wasn't hard at all. For some time after that, they walked on the ridge separating the crater from the labyrinth proper, but then, finally, had to turn west and enter the maze of crimson coral. Sunny couldn't help but sigh once the familiar coral walls surrounded him once again. He didn't miss the first months of his infernal voyage into the dream realm at all. Well, maybe a little, but not because of the damn labyrinth itself, that's for sure. The Crimson Forest was simultaneously the same and vastly different from the region Ophit that he had traveled through before. The coral maze itself was pretty much identical to how it had been east of the gargantuan crater. However, the creatures populating it in these parts were vastly different. There were no members of the Carapace Legion around, at least not anywhere Sunny could see. Instead, the dominant tribe of nightmare creatures in this region seemed to consist of nasty, spider-like critters that had a habit of decorating the walls and passages of the labyrinth with endless amounts of gray, incredibly sticky cobwebs. What a source! Their webs seemed made not out of spider silk, but out of thin metal wires that were astoaceran and could cut the victim into little pieces if it thrashed too much after getting caught. Needless to say, getting yourself stuck in these webs was tantamount to a death sentence. The deeper into the labyrinth they went, the more of these cobwebs surrounded them. It came to the point where they had to use Cassie's flying rapier to clear the path ahead every few minutes, slowing down the speed of the cohort to crawl. During one of these stops, Sunny rubbed his face and thought, I just hope that nothing attacks us while we wait. Turning to him, the shadow glared for a few moments and then tiredly shook its head. It then placed one palm across its face and looked down, as if defeated. Single quote ... What did I say? A moment later, several massive spider-like creatures jumped out of the cracks in the coral and attacked them. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 206 to 206, Triumph. 1046 words. The spiders were about the size of a human, incredibly fast, and had plates of something that resembled iron covering parts of their repulsive bodies. They looked like armored battle machines created for the sole purpose of slaughtering living things. They also looked strangely familiar. With a little effort, Sunny realized that these abominations looked a lot like lesser, much smaller versions of the giant fallen beasts that had destroyed the original Stone Saint and her kin. It's just that their size and armor weren't nearly as formidable. If so, I have bad news for you, fools. As soon as spiders attacked, the members of the cohort reacted with the deadly calmness of experienced Dark City hunters. Weapons flashed in the air, severing limbs and piercing through iron asked how it was paper. Effie straight up flattened one of the creatures with a devastating strike off her battered shield. The poor beast didn't even have time to understand what a huge mistake it had made. The others were not sufficient. Sunny himself threw the prowling thorn and pulled on the invisible string as soon as it sunk into the fleshophone of the spiders, bringing its jump to an abrupt end and sending it crashing to the ground. Before the beast could stand up, Quiet Dancer streaked through the air and pierced its head clean through. Just a few short seconds after the spiders had tried to ambush the group of humans, the battle was over. 3 dead nightmare creatures were sprawled in the mud, while the 4th one ended up into a coral wall with several arrows. They could have even shaved a second or two if it weren't for the need to look out for the spiderwebs. Sunny shook his head. Disappointing. Wait, why was he disappointed? Great. This was great. Not every victory had to almost cost him his life. If there was one thing to feel disappointed about, it was that this one was so swift that he had not even gotten the chance to finish any of the enemies himself, thus not receiving any rewards from the spell. But even then, he would beg Lad to only fight easy battles like this in the future. Neffis cleaned the blade off her sword with a piece of cloth, listened to the silence for a few moments to make sure that nothing else was going to attack them, and then gave the cohort a go-ahead to start dressing the monsters down. Soon, soul shards, strips of meat and other useful parts were cut, cleaned, and put into Effie's enchanted bag. Everything was done with efficient speed and professionalism that could only come from a lot of experience. Sunny could only shake his head again. They were able to dispose of the iron spiders with such ease because of 2 reasons. First, as far as nightmare creatures went, these ones were not on the same level as, for example, carapace scavengers. They had a slight advantage in speed, but were not nearly as strong, agile, and ridiculously tough. If Sunny could guess, he would say that the iron spiders relied heavily on their webs and battlefield advantage to defeat the prey. Because the cohort had destroyed the webs in advance, their main advantage was gone. The second reason was the cohort itself. They were some of the deadliest humans on the Forgotten Shore. Sunny was sure that at least 4 of them could kill a pathfinder of the host in single combat, if not one of the lieutenants themselves. They were the best and the brightest the outer settlement could offer, after all. Effie had been right when she said that there had never been such a powerful cohort outside the walls of the Bright Castle before. All in all, the 6 of them were more than equipped to handle just 3 awakened beasts. The labyrinth was going to really try harder if it wished to see them dead. Sunny chuckled. Just 3 awakened beasts, yeah. How crazy did this sound? And yet, it was true. Finishing up with the dead spiders, the cohort indifferently left their eviscerated bodies behind and continued on their way. After several more minor skirmishes with the iron spiders, they had finally reached their destination. Not too far away from them, colored pink by the evening sun, a magnificent arch of white marble rose high above the sea of crimson coral. The giant structure was clearly created by the same people who had built the Bright Castle, and made from the same stone. It looked like a much larger sibling of the pristine arch that guarded the entrance to the white road which climbed all the way to the outer settlement. Only this one was much more weathered, bleak, and damaged. Signs of corrosion and deep cracks covered its surface, with one OFIT's sides being partially collapsed. Sunny studied the arch and looked at Neffis. This eyesore stopped for the night. She gave him a simple nod and said after a short pause. Ween topic you poor pace. The night is close, and we might have to fight to clear the top of it. Sunny sighed. Fighting again, when would they finally be able tourist? It had been such a long day. However, he kept his mouth shut. Changing Star was the most tired out of all of them, due to healing all their wounds, Nollis. And he didn't see her complaining, so it wasn't this place. Tohi's left. Effie suddenly cursed and groaned. More fighting. Come on, when are we finally going to eat? Sunny blinked. Well, that works, too, I guess. Staring at the huntress, Neffis shook her head and silently walked forward. Soon, they reached the giant arch. Kai summoned his bow and flew up, only to return a few minutes later and report that no terrible monster was nesting on top of the ancient structure. With sighs of relief, the members of the cohort climbed the golden rope one after another and were soon standing far above the labyrinth, silently watching as flood of black water drowned it in the lightless depths. As sun disappeared beyond the horizon, they were left on a rectangular island made out of white marble. All around it, there was nothing but the undulating waves of the dark sea. Sunny was once again surrounded from all sides by nothing but darkness and black water. Had it not liked the feeling? Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 207 to 207, Beach Episode. 1096 words. The night passed with no incidents. In the morning, Sunny was woken up by the sound of the surging waves and opened his eyes to see the sun slowly rising from beyond the horizon. Rubbing his face, he sat up and looked around, noticing that most of the cohort was still asleep. Only Kai, who had been the last one to stand watch, was awake, sitting on the edge of the arch and admiring the dawn with a dreamy look on his face. Sunny wanted to call out to him and warn the charming archer not to sit this close to the edge, but then remembered that Kai could fly. Yeah, like I would forget it again. Using the opportunity, he dove into the soul sea and summoned Stone Saint from the depths of the shadow core, where she was sleeping in the embrace of nurturing black flames. Just like before, the shadow did not appear from a sphere of light like an echo would, but stepped out from a whirlpool of dark fire. Then, she stood motionlessly in front of Sunny like an actual statue, seemingly indifferent both to his presence and the wounds covering her body. Sunny walked around the Stone Saint, studying the extent of damage done to her by the undead horde. The armor of the taciturn knight was battered and broken, pierced in several places by the claws of the countless skeletons she had fought. The ruby dust wasn't flowing from the breaches anymore, but he could see deep gashes on her smooth, gray skin. Bastards, who dares to hurt his shadow? Shaking his head, Sunny dismissed the saint, sending her back into the restorative darkness of the shadow core. The damage, while extensive, was not really threatening to her existence. In a couple of days, his pet monster should fully recover. In fact, she already looked better than she had yesterday. Leaving the soul sea, Sunny inhaled the fresh air, lingered for a few moments, and then turned to Kai. Hey, knight, are you stupid? Don't sit this close to the edge. The charming archer looked at them and raised an eyebrow. I can fly, remember, if I fall. Sunny scoffed. I'm not worried about you falling into the cursed sea. I'm worried about something dragging you off into it. That'd be terrible, right? Quite happy with himself, he grinned and turned away. What honest way to start the day. Because everyone needed some time to rest and recuperate, they decided to spend a day on the Marble Arch and continue their journey tomorrow. As a result, Sunny was currently staring at the sight that wasn't really funny, but filled him with mirth nevertheless. Back in the real world, when he had time to consume some entertainment, Sunny had noticed a certain popular trope. In most dramas, webtoons, and cartoons aimed at young boys and teenagers, the heroes would inevitably end up spending a day at the beach during their adventures. He didn't quite know why such a trope existed, but suspected that it was just an excuse to show the female characters in nothing but revealing swimsuits. Not that he had anything against it. In any case, Sunny had never imagined that he was going to end up in such an episode himself one day. This is simply hilarious. Barely holding himself from laughing out loud, Sunny glanced at his companions. Because everyone's armor and weapons were damaged during the battle in the catacombs, they had to keep these memories inside the soul sea for a bit of time to allow them to restore themselves, just like Stone Saint was currently doing in the depths of his shadow core. As a result, all of them, including Sunny himself, were currently wearing nothing except for some loincloths and, in the case of the girls, makeshift brassieres. Provided, these crude undergarments weren't really swimsuits, and the Marble Arch could barely be considered red a beach even at night, but still, the situation was funnily similar. They were all half naked and relaxing in the middle of something that someone could call an adventure, so it was close enough. Ha, he was in a good mood, everyone was busy doing their thing. There was a fire in the middle of the arch, with roasting meat filling the air with an appetizing aroma. Effie was tending to it. The tan and lean body of the muscular huntress looked like it was cut from stone, as if she was a sculpture of fantasy and goddess come to life. Sunny tried to count her abs and got distracted halfway through by, not so stone-like parts off her robust figure. After a couple of seconds of thoughtless bliss, Sunny had to hurriedly look away. The last thing he wanted was pure thoughts. Neffy's was helping Effie with the breakfast. Next to the vigorous huntress, her figure seemed especially slender and lithe. However, she was also extremely athletic in appearance. Her ivory skin was pleasantly contrasted against the olive skin of their boisterous pathfinder. What a sight to behold. From a purely aesthetic standpoint, of course. Seeing changing star like that reminded Sunny of the early days of their stay in the dream realm. Things had been much simpler back then. Suddenly wistful, he looked away and checked what Cassie was doing. The blind girl was resting near the fire, wrapped in her beautiful cloak. With her delicate features and small stature, she looked extremely lovely. And then, there were Kai and Castor. Sunny sighed and looked down at his own scrawny body. Honestly, after all these months spent hunting monsters, eating meat and absorbing shadow fragments, he looked much better than he used to. In fact, by human standards, he was nothing short of, well, above average. Even as far as awakened went, he could probably compete with some in the looks department. But those two specimens were simply on another level. Kai was tall and shaped like a young god, with lean muscles rolling under his flawless skin and a svelte figure that begged to be sculpted into a marble masterpiece. Sunny could swear that even sunlight was attracted to him, illuminating the charming archer in just a way to make him look as gorgeous as possible. Currently, Kai was tending to his arrows, somehow managing to make even that simple task look glamorous. Castor was much the same, with a perfect body and broad shoulders that simply screamed of power, appeal and potency. With a darker skin to match his gallant and manly image, he was basically the epitome of masculinity. This was contrasted by a handsome, but gentle face and humorous green eyes, creating a rather tempting visage. Sunny grimaced and turned away. You know what, to hell with this beach day nonsense. Let's do something productive. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 208 to 208. Something productive. 1099 words. Walking over to Kai, Sunny cleared his throat and forced himself to not cover his eyes. The damn archer was just too dazzling. Him being shirtless in crowded places should have honestly been categorized as a public hazard back in the real world. If not, there was a gross oversight. I wonder how he was made. Probably in a secret government laboratory or a magic cauldron of some sort. I mean, there's no way that this dude is the same species as me, right? After a few seconds of Sunny blankly staring at them, Kai smiled politely. Sunny, did you want something? Sunny flinched and covered his eyes. Didn't smile at me. Kai blinked. Quote. Alright, breathing heavily, Sunny glared at them and slowly lowered his hand. That's better. And yes, ID want something. Kai suddenly livened. Yupan pointed at his chest. What ice that? An accessory. What ish? Lowering his gaze, Sunny noticed the mysterious key hanging on a thread tied around his neck. He didn't really want to show it to anyone, but with the puppeteer's shroud restoring itself in the soul sea, there were not a lot of places where he could hide it. None that he was willing to ouse, at least. Plus, no one else was supposed to be able to see the light of divinity, so to them, it just looked like a small iron key. Sunny frowned. It's not an accessory, it's a key. Quote. Kai hesitated. Oh, what does it open? Sunny shrugged. How should I know? The charming archer seemed a little confused. But if it's not an accessory and it doesn't open anything, why are you carrying it around? His questions were starting to get tiresome. Sunny sighed. Open something, of course. Kai scratched his nose. But you just said that you didn't know what it opens. Sunny gritted his teeth. It's a damn key, right? So if it's open something, I just carry it around in case I find something that can be opened by that damned key. What is so hard to understand? The beautiful archer gave him a strange look. Oh, I see. That definitely makes sense. Curses. That's not how I planned to approach him. Sunny instantly changed his expression and looked at Kai with a wide smile. The sudden shift looked sort of creepy. What I wanted to say, Knight, my dear friend, we're friends, right? Anyway, what I wanted to say was that I hope that this answer satisfies your curiosity. That's something a friend would say, right? The charming young man gave him a dubious look. I guess. Sunny made his smile wider, feeling his face hurt a little. Great, so we're friends. Well, some might say that it's your lucky day, buddy. Because today, and only today, probably, Sunny's Gorgeous Emporium offers customers an exclusive friendship deal. Just for friends of the establishment. Aren't you lucky? Kai suddenly coughed. Quote. Wasn't it Itsumi's brilliant emporium last time? Sunny blinked. Was it? Well, doesn't matter. The deal still stands. Are you interested or not? The archer lingered for a few moments, and then cautiously said. But Sunny, you still haven't told me what exactly that deal entails. Is it a deal for customers you consider friends, or are you trying to sell me your friendship? Or wait, do you want to buy mine? Orbith. I'm confused. As if waiting for that response, Sunny nodded energetically. Yes, I'm glad that you asked. In fact, I have an incredible item that I want to sell. It's so incredible that I am even reluctant to part with it. But since you are my friend, I'm willing to give it away. Practically for free. Full friendship discount, just for you. No need to thank me, really. Attracted by the noise, the others left what they were doing and were now staring at the two of them. Effie got distracted from preparing meat and was now observing the circus with an expectant grin. Realizing that he is now the center of attention, Kai sighed. Alright, I'll bite. What is that incredible item you want to sell me? Sunny remained silent for a few moments, and then suddenly stopped smiling. Oh, just something I had gathering dust in my soul sea. It's a memory that can serve as an endless supply of arrows. As long as you didn't miss. The beautiful archer Shea suddenly lit up. He glanced at this quiver and said, wait, really? You really have such a memory? After thinking about it for a long time, Sunny had decided to give the blood arrow to Kai. Having the archer of their cohort armed with it would make a lot of things easier during this journey. He could potentially earn himself a BOW in the future and learn how to use it, but it wouldn't be anytime soon. Plus, with how dangerous the enchantments of the blood arrow were, nothing short of excellence would fly. And excellence took a lot of time to achieve, time that he didn't have. So, giving it a skilled archer like Kai was a better decision. Their recent encounters with the iron spiders only made Sunny more certain that this was the right thing to do. But Hue isn't going to give it away for free. Yes, Ito have such a memory. Then, he casually added, oh, did I forget to say? It can provide an endless supply of arrows, and also all those arrows will be of the ascended rank. A grave silence settled over the marble arch. You're in possession of an ascended memory. That question was asked by Castor. Kai didn't have to ask, because he already knew that Sunny was telling the truth. His eyes slightly widened. One thing forgotten sure, ascended memories were exceedingly rare, for an obvious reason. Sleepers could only get one by defeating a fallen nightmare creature, and there weren't talent of people capable of such a feat. Added to that was the fact that not every kill provided a memory. In fact, most didn't. To receive one was the dream of every inhabitant of the Dark City. Sunny shrugged. Oh, I have a couple. Why, the other being the onyx armor, which was broken and useless. But they didn't need talk now that, honestly. He grinned. Only the best wares in the Sunny's astonishing emporium. Wait, was it astonishing? Who cares? You get the sentiment. Castor shook his head. How did you get an ascended memory? The grin froze on Sunny's face. When he spoke a few moments later, all humor was gone from his voice, replaced by coldness. Well, if you have talk now. I got it by killing a fallen beast. Before you ask, this time, it didn't have to shake my finger or spit. I just looked at it, and it died. Then, he turned his head and looked straight at Castor. I am very proficient in killing things, you know. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 209 to 209, Fireside Banter. 1078 words. In the end, Kai agreed to his deal. In exchange for the blood arrow, he gave Sunny the 2 weaker arrows he had. Sunny fed them to the Stone Saint, bringing her amount of shadow fragments to 29. That was 2 more than she had in the past, which meant that he received the same amount of fragments that he would have gotten by feeding her the blood arrow itself. He didn't really gain anything, but also didn't lose anything. Kai was the one who really profited from their exchange. So Sunny didn't lie when he said that it was an incredible deal. After breakfast, which transpired in somewhat awkward silence, Sunny sprawled on the ground and smiled happily. You know, guys, these past few weeks made me realize something. Actually, it was all thanks to Kai, who introduced me. Tostev. Effie stretched, making Sunny stutter and lose the train of thought for a second, then smiled with satisfaction and glanced at them. Really, and what is that? Sunny hesitated for a few moments and said, when I was a little kid, I loved reading webtoons about the Awakened. You know, the ones where they always explore ancient ruins, battle nightmare creatures, and grow more powerful with each victory. He chuckled. The hero and his cohort decide on an adventure, vanquish evil, gain mighty memories, then return to the real world and sell their spoils at the adventurer's shop. They spend their money to upgrade their equipment, and immediately set out on a more epic and dangerous adventure. Cassie smiled. I love to read those too. Sunny glanced at her and sighed. Yeah, but when I got older, I couldn't help but think, what are they thinking about? Exploring ancient ruins is not a wise thing, Toto. In fact, only crazy people would do it. No matter how good you are, sooner or later, you will meet something more terrifying than any human can handle and die. If this was real life, why would all those adventurers going to the ruins over and over again? The blind girl tilted her head and opened her mouth, but then closed it again. Sunny smiled, but then it at me. They were not doing it to vanquish evil. They were doing it to collect a wide variety of powerful memories. You see, the real dream is not Tobeth the hero, one of their companions, or Evan the love interest. The real dream is Tobeth the owner of the shop where the hero sells his trophies and buys new equipment. That way you can live a pretty life without risking your neck. That's the real goal. Heck crossed his arms and added. After a few short years of adventuring around the dream realm and collecting memories, you can retire, open a shop, and live comfortably for the rest of your life. All you need is to sell a memory once every couple of years. Maybe make some money off the younger, less fortunate adventurers, too. Kai laughed and looked at Sunny with curiosity. So, say that we somehow manage to return to the real world and become true awakened. Is this what you're going, Toto? Sunny thought about it for a few moments and shrugged. I don't know. I didn't really have a lot, Toto, in the real world, apart from compiling all the things I've learned about the Forgotten Shore into a report and giving it to a teacher who was kind to him back at the academy. So, maybe. I didn't have enough memories yet to an aerial store, though. He glanced at the charming archer and smiled. What about you? What is the thing you really want, Toto, if you return to the real world? Kai suddenly turned away with a look of embarrassment on his face. Oh, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it, but after several seconds, he suddenly said in ashy voice. Quote ... Avatar singer. Sunny blinked. Oh what? The archer hesitated for a while, and then explained. Avatar singer is a music competition show. Popular singers compete with each other, but the twist is that they are all using the stock VR avatars to perform. Sub judges can only evaluate their voices and skill. They only learn the singer's identity after. Effie giggled. Why would you want to hide your pretty face, Knight? It's your best feature. Kai was silent for a few moments, and then smiled gently. I just think that it would be nice to be judged based on my skill and talent alone, with nothing else getting in the way. Also, that would be a great way to announce my return to the fans. Just imagine, they would be so excited. That would be perfect media storm. Sunny shook his head. It seemed that Kai was really a celebrity. Talking about things like fan reactions and media storms with a straight face, did he even hear himself? But it was Anna's dream, at least. Better than his own stupid desires, by far. Turning to Effie, he asked. What about you? What would you do in the real world? The huntress grinned. I didn't even have to think about it. I would go eat chicken wings, the real ones. And then start preparing myself for the second nightmare. Pretty simple. Everybody grew silent. After a while, Cassie said. Are you sure that you want to challenge another nightmare? Effie shrugged. I have my reasons. Soya's. For me, that is the only choice. The blind girl was quiet for a bit, and then said. I would go and spend time with my mom and dad. That's the thing I want most in the real world. Castor glanced at her and courtly nodded. I agree with Cassie. Family is the most important. When I come back, I will greet my father and look him in the eyes with pride, knowing that ID not let our clan down. Then, I will try Toto everything in my power to grow as fast as possible, to relieve him of his worries and propel our bloodline to new heights. How very, legacy-like of him. Finally turning to Neffy's, Sunny looked at her with a subtly dark expression and asked. How about you, Neff? What are you going to do when you return to the real world? Changing Star was silent for a while, looking into the distance with a calm expression. Then, she sighed and answered in a quiet voice. I would go visit my mom, too. Everyone grew silent. Sunny blinked, a little confused. Wait, your mom? I thought she was dead. Neffy's lingered for a bit, and then turned her face away. She is, technically. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 210 to 210. Shadow of the Past. 1024 words. Technically dead. What does she mean? Sunny glanced at the others and saw that they, too, were confused. Everyone except for Castor, that is, who seemed like heck knew something. A few moments passed in tense silence, which was broken by Changing Star's eye. Looking at them, she said evenly. My mother is one of the Hollow. She became Hollow while pregnant with me, actually. So I never really met her. Just her body. Neffy's grew silent. After a while, a strange smile appeared on her face. It's funny, really. When my grandmother was still alive, I made a point of treating that body as nothing but a corpse. But once she passed away and we were the only ones left, well, I found myself getting a bit confused. Neffy shrugged and turned away once again. Anyway, before leaving for the first nightmare, I used what little money there was left for estate to buy her a VIP spot in a specialized hollow care facility. They are treating her really well. But still, I didn't like the idea of her being alone there. So when I return, that's what I'm going to do. Visit her. No one said anything, heavily affected by her words. Sunny stared at Changing Star, trying to imagine what it must have felt like, growing up in the company of your parents' soulless shell. With death staring at you through those empty eyes every day, always looming over you like a dark shadow. Both of your past and your future. Maybe that was a part of the reason why Neff hated the spell so much. Sensing a heaviness in the air, Changing Star glanced at them and smiled darkly. What, is this your first time meeting a Hollowborn? Well, I can blame you. Creatures of my breed are pretty rare. In fact, even I have never met another one. Then, she sighed and stretched her legs, moving them closer to the fire. So yeah, that and dye my hair. These are the things I would do in the real world first. Sunny blinked. Quote ... Dye your hair. Neffy's nodded. How is that a priority? Feeling that he was missing something, Sunny scratched his head and asked. Why? She glanced at them in surprise. What do you mean, why? I'm not used to it, and it's weird. Do I need another reason? Hess stared at her with a perplexed expression. Noticing it, Changing Star frowned and asked with a tiny hint of amusement in her voice. Sunny, did you, perhaps, think that this is my natural hair color? He was silent for a while, then opened his mouth and closed it again. Quote. It's not. Neffys looked at them for a while with a strange expression, and then suddenly exploded with laughter. Her laugh was melodic, pure, and very pleasant to the ear. With regret, Sunny realized that he had never heard it before. He wished that their lives were different, so that people could hear Neffy's laugh more often. But they weren't, and would probably never be. After a while, she glanced at them and smiled. Sunny, it's Silver, for Spelsuke, who has natural silver hair. Luckily, at that point, Kai suddenly came to his rescue. Actually, it thought that it's natural too. Ah, it suits you very well, Lady Neffys. Changing Star turned to him with an expression of utter surprise. Then, she glanced at Effie with a silent question. The huntress nodded. Yeah, me too. I mean, who knows what you legacies are even made of? Neffys blinked a couple of times, then shook her head in bewilderment. Well, no, it's not natural. It became like that after my first nightmare. Kai leaned forward with curiosity. Really, what color was your hair before? She shrugged. Black, a normal human color. The charming archer stared at her, and then smiled. That would suit you very well too, Lady Neffys. Ah, I can just see it. However, Sunny couldn't. The idea of changing Star without her arresting, eye-catching silver hair simply could not fit into his head. Let alone the fact that she was a brunette. How was this even possible? That would look so wrong. Right, well, as it turned out, life was full of surprises. Today, Hell learned not one, but two entirely new things about the person he had thought heck knew the best in the world. Who would have guessed that this would happen? Single quote. There might be something else except for skimpy swimsuits to these beach episodes, huh? After that, they spent some time resting and lazily conversing with each other. However, pretty soon, people started to get restless from boredom. To combat it somehow, Sunny suggested the idea of playing a sports game. His motives were not at all dictated by a secret desire to see a bunch of absolutely gorgeous young people jump around and wrestle with each while very lightly dressed. Nope, not one bit. However, things didn't go as Shahad envisioned them. Pretty soon, Sunny found himself cursing Ashawas desperately pulling on the golden rope in a furious match off tug of war. Well, it was supposed to be furious. But what was actually transpiring was Effie casually holding the rope with one hand while the four of them, Sunny, Cassie, Kai and Castor, were trying to move her from the spot with no visible results whatsoever. After a while, the huntress simply pulled on the rope and sent their entire team to the ground. That's cheating. With a satisfied grin, Effie walked over and towered above him, her arms akimbo. Looking down directly at Sunny, she smirked. Weak, when did you lose your spirit, shorty? Then, she winked and said in a mischievous tone. Back at the cathedral, you were able to perform better. Not to mention last longer. Sunny grew bright red and gritted his teeth. Shut up, people will misunderstand. The huntress looked at them with a shocked expression. Misunderstand? What are you? Oh. Then, she pretended to be horrified and covered her mouth with one hand. You, what kind of fata-generate are you? Training. I meant while you were training. While Sunny was staring at her in utter disbelief, his mouth wide open, Effie snorted, then turned away and exploded with laughter. Shaking her head, the boisterous huntress giggled one last time and walked away. Single quote. No more sports games, ever. That wretched troublemaker will win them all, anyway. He needed to teach himself how to come up with better ideas. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave, Chapter 211 to 211, Game of Lies. 1,164 words. With a bit of disappointment, Sunny realized that all types of physical activities were out of the question. Not only because Effie was going down every damn game, but also because Cassie couldn't participate in most. If that was the case, they would have to settle for a battle of wit instead. After thinking for a while, he made a few preparations and addressed his companions in a mischievous tone. Alright, let's shave another competition. This time, it will be challenge for your minds. Sunny paused for a few moments and then smiled. And to spice things up, this time, there will be prize. The winner will get this. With that, he produced the ascended soul shard that he had gotten from the corpse eater from behind his back and showed it to everyone. The beautiful crystal shined with an alluring, ethereal light. Except for Neffys, who was resting with her eyes closed, everyone showed the shard a lot of interest. Sunny grinned. Of course, they were interested. It was very rare to see one of these, after all. He didn't really have Oz for this thing right now, though. And making the cohort stronger would, in turn, increase his own chances of getting through the expedition alive. So parting with the shard was not that detrimental. Especially if could have some fun in return. Effie was the first one to speak. What are the terms of the competition? Sunny put the crystal away before answering. It's really simple. I'll give you a riddle, and the first person to answer correctly wins. How does that sound? The huntress looked at them with doubt and shrugged. Sounds boring, but alright, let's play. Smiling, Sunny commanded the shadow to separate from him and put the ordinary rock on it. Then, he turned to Effie and said, listen carefully. Imagine if you will that the two Ofus, my shadow and I, are in possession of our air treasure. One Ofus is honorable, extremely attractive awakened that can tell Nolly, while the other one Isable, ugly, stupid devil that would never tell a word of truth. But you didn't know which one Icewick. Effie grinned. I mean, isn't it obvious? Sunny blinked. Shut up. Also, it is an imaginary situation. Okay, anyway, you have to find out which one Ofus is shitting the treasure. If you do, you will get the treasure. If you don't, the devil will kill you. You can only ask one question, either Tome or the shadow. Understand? The huntress giggled and flexed her muscles. Can I just beat the answer out of you? Sunny observed her vigorous figure for a moment too long, and then smiled. You can. Also, you're dead. Effie stared at them in bewilderment. What? Why? He shrugged and glanced in her direction with disdain. Did I not tell you that you can only ask one question? Well, who told you to ask whether you can beat me or not? What a stupid way to ask a question. While the unruly huntress was throwing daggers at them with her eyes, Sunny turned away and said. Next, Kai smiled apologetically at Effie and approached him. Alright, Knight, what is your question? Doc considered that our roles might have changed since the last round. The charming young man gestured at the marble beneath his feet and addressed the shadow. What color is the stone I am pointing to? Since Sunny had expected such a turn of events, the ordinary rock immediately answered in the deepest voice he could muster. Quote. White. Kai looked at Sunny with a triumphant smile and said, "So, I win. The shadow is obviously the honorable awakened." Sunny gave him an. "You indeed learned which one Ophius is a dirty liar." Surprise. It was me. However, that was not the task. The task was to find out which one Ophius is shitting the treasure, and you have already used up your only question. So, sorry, buddy, but you're also dead. I'll miss you very much. In this hypothetical situation, the charming archer sighed and looked at them with reproach. Sunny raised his eyebrows. What? Why are you looking at me like this? Be grateful that I allowed you to play at all. With your flaw, you are like a walking cheat as far as his game is concerned. Hess scowled, then added, "In fact, the mere fact that you claim to have a flaw is on a front tooth, truly flawed people." Kai lingered for a bit and walked to the side to sit near Effie. Sunny had to suppress his laugh when he noticed that the boisterous huntress reacted to being this close to the charming young man's deific body pretty much exactly the same as himself sometimes reacted to her. "Get your head out of the gutter. Pure thoughts, Effie." A wide grin still found its way onto his face. Shaking his head, Sunny turned away to call the next contestant, but Kai suddenly spoke, interrupting him. "You're not entirely right, you know," he said gently. Sunny raised an eyebrow. "About what?" The archer looked down before answering. "About my flaw. Yes, it is not as heavy of a burden as many others have to carry. But it's still a curse. What is she talking about? It's almost entirely like a second aspect ability." Looking at Kai with a doubtful expression, Sunny asked. "Yeah, how, exactly? Please explain, because I really can think of a situation where this flaw of yours could be burden." The beautiful young man was silent for a while, and then looked at Patsy with a sad smile. Imagine hearing the person who is the most important to you in the whole wide world telling you that they love you, only to realize that they don't. Imagine listening to your friend's words of encouragement, only to understand that he secretly wishes for you to crash and burn. He sighed. "Ignorance is bliss, Sunny. After returning from my first nightmare, I had to come to terms with the fact that most of the people in my life were not who I thought they were. And that what hid behind their smiles was ugly and vicious." Kai gestured to himself and said, "Because of who I am, and how I am, there was always a whirlpool of people around me. But after learning their true faces, I couldn't, well, let's just say that, if I had the choice, I would have preferred to stay blissfully blind to the truth forever." He grew quiet. "Damn." Suddenly, Kai smiled. "But that's I enjoy spending time with you so much, Sunny. No matter how bizarre the things you say are, three ways true. I never met anyone as stupidly honest as you. It's very refreshing." Sunny shifted uncomfortably. Did he just call me stupid? Now he was kind of sorry for mocking the charming young man about his flaw. Perhaps it would be useful to someone like Sunny. But to a person like Kai, who always attracted the worst kind of attention from people, it could really be incredibly painful. The spell knew what it was doing. It always hit you in your most vulnerable spot. Damned spell. The being that weaved it must have been the worst kind of facet bastard. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 212 to 212, Knights and Knaves. 975 words. Sure. One day Kai would inevitably learn that Sunny was not as honest of a person as considered him to be, but until then, having the naive archer believe in this ridiculous notion was rather beneficial. Turning away with a bit of awkwardness, Sunny glanced at Castor and called. Next, the proud legacy was looking at Nightingale with a heavy expression. Hearing Sunny's voice, he lingered for a moment and then shook his head. It seemed that Castor did not want to play his game. Sunny was also suddenly painfully aware that between the six of them, 4 people had openly shared their flaws with the rest, bait out of necessity or because of trust. Only 2 had not. One of the 2 was Sunny, and the other one was Castor. Sunny knew why he was hiding his flaw from everyone, but what was the proud reason? It sort of went against his whole honorable and dependable persona. With how devoted he acted toward nephews in the cohort, it was strange to see him keeping secrets. Was his reason the same as Sunny's, a dear vulnerability that the flaw would uncover? Or was there some other reason? Maybe he didn't trust the members of the cohort as much as she tried to make them think-headed. And if so, why? With a shrug, Sunny left Castor alone. There was no point in lingering on these thoughts now. Until he had more information, any conclusion he could make would be useless anyway. Looking at Cassie, Hesmel then said, "Hey, Saz, wanna give eat a tree?" The blind girl hesitated for habit, and then slowly approached him. While she was walking over, Sunny couldn't help but think back to a conversation he had with her in the distant past. Back then, Cassie had told him that knowledge could be the heaviest thing in the world. The burden of her flaw, while completely different from Kai's, was at the same time eerily similar. They both longed for the bliss of ignorance, but were doomed to always bear the crushing weight of unwanted knowledge. When Sunny thought about it, he found that all members of the cohort were connected with each other by invisible strings. Many things about them were like reflections, simultaneously the same, but also completely opposite. Like the fact that he could tell Nolly, while Kai could not be lied to. Or the fact that Nephi's was like sunlight, while he was made of shadows. Cassie could not see, while he had basically 2 pairs of eyes. Changing Star dreamed of destroying the nightmare spell, but Effie dreamed of making it their paradise. And soon, were these the strings off it? Or was he just making empty connections because that was what humans were prone to? Come to think of it, only Castor didn't seem to be connected to any of them in any kind of a meaningful way. What was that all about? Cassie sat down near Sunny, pulling him out of his thoughts. He forced out a smile. Right, just like I said, the roles might have switched. So, what is your question? Cassie smiled and gestured to the shadow. My question is, if I were to ask Sunny which one of you has the treasure, what would he say? Sunny hesitated for a few moments, then gave the ordinary stone a mental command to speak one of the answers that he had whispered to it in advance. In the same comically deep voice, the shadow seemed to speak. Quote. The shadow has it. Cassie nodded and turned to Sunny with settled glee on her exquisite, doll-like face. Sunny, you have the treasure. Give. With that, she expectantly outstretched her hand. With a disappointed sigh, Sunny put the ascended soul shard in her palm and said in a listless voice. Congratulations, you've won. Great job, yay. Cassie grasped the shard and giggled. Meanwhile, Effie leaned forward with a bewildered look. What, that's it? She stared at the blind girl in astonishment, and then asked. How the hell did you do it? Cassie smiled and crushed the shard in her small fist, absorbing the soul essence. Then, she shook her head and said, "It's simple, really. No matter who you ask about the other person's answer, their answer will always be the opposite of the correct one. That's because the awakened would have to tell the truth about the lie, while the devil would have to tell Ali about the truth. Do you understand?" Effie thought for a moment, then shook her head. "Nope, all the words you said seem to be familiar, but I didn't understand crap." "What do you even mean?" Cassie laughed. "Well, you should think about it in your free time. Or, just beat Sunny up the next time he decides to tease you with such riddles." With that, she went away, quite happy with herself. Sunny watched her go with his mouth wide open. Did she really just say that? Meanwhile, the perplexed huntress was staring at Sunny with a deep frown. "Yeah, I might just do that the next time." Heppelt, what's up with that? This was an honest competition. Didn't be sore loser. Effie grinned menacingly. "Sore, let's see which one of yous will be sore when I'm done with you." What kind of soreness does she mean, I wonder? Wait, no, why would I wonder about that? Standing up, Sunny glanced at Effie and scoffed. "Who's going to be done with who? Didn't flatter yourself, beanpole." With that, he walked away with contempt clearly written all over his face. His pace, however, was suspiciously hurried. A while later, the day was drawing to a close. Some of the memories had already restored themselves, so almost everyone was wearing their clothes and armors. Which, as far as Sunny was concerned, was a real shame. From a purely aesthetic point of view, of course. However, something else attracted his full attention. At the far end of the marble arch, Neffys and Castor were standing facing each other, with sharp swords in their hands. They were about to clash. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 213 to 213, Sword Saints. 1022 words. Back when Neffys was teaching Sunny how to toss the sword, he had never been good enough to be her sparring partner. Once he learned enough to be openly used in a training fight, their fragile alliance had already broken and shattered to pieces. So, apart from that short altercation on the somber slopes of the Ashen Barrow, they had never actually crossed swords with each other. Now, it seemed, Changing Star had found a reliable sparring partner. Castor had not only replaced Sunny as her right-hand man, but also filled the roles that Sunny had been either reluctant or unfit to take on. Well, good for them. Once the memories of the cohort were close to being fully restored, Neffys and Castor moved to the far end of the White Arch to practice. Now, they were standing opposite each other, ready to begin. Although no one called him over, Sunny approached the two legacies and sat down, ready to enjoy the spectacle. He was keenly interested in observing these two immensely skilled swordsmen in action. Both of them had been trained for combat from the day they could walk. Watching them would surely be helpful to his understanding of battle styles and techniques. Not to mention that he was very interested to see the rematch between Neffys and Castor. The last time he saw them fight, Changing Star had lost, but not by much. She also had held back her aspect ability at that time, but he doubted that would change today. Neff's flame could bayest both Tohel and annihilate, but sadly, not to train. Castor glanced at them and frowned with visible displeasure. Was he irritated because Sunny was about to learn nothing or to about his technique, or because Sunny was ruining his alone time with Neffys? Either way, I didn't care. "What are you doing?" Sunny shrugged. "Watching. Why, does this part of the arch belong to your clan or something?" The proud legacy shook his head and turned away. "Dose you wish." Neff glanced at Sunny and didn't say anything. However, he could tell that she didn't mind. In fact, it was almost as if she was approving of his decision. Without wasting any more time, the two of them clashed in a whirlwind of steel, moving with the kind of speed that made it difficult for Sunny to follow along. The clangor of swords filled the air. Abbott stunned, stared at the furious fight with a blank expression. Single quote. Damn, after the months of hunting monsters in the Dark City and his lessons with the Stone Saint, Sunny thought that he had developed his skill a lot. And headed, it's just that compared to Neffys and Castor, he was still so far behind that it was nothing short of disheartening. Before, he had sometimes entertained the thought of maybe being able to stand against them, well, at least one of them, on equal ground. But now, this illusion was ruthlessly broken. If things went south and he ended up on the opposite sides of the barricades with Castor, facing him would bet amount to committing suicide. For now, at least, which, of course, simply meant that instead opposing him, Sunny would have to stab him in the back. Duly noted, Hue isn't going to take on an enemy of this caliber in a forthright manner, anyway. What was he, a fool? Concentrating on the fight, Sunny watched attentively. With the benefit of his new experience, he was able to discern more and learn more from how these two experts moved and acted. Sometimes, he was even able to predict what they were going to do next. However, as time passed, a subtle frown appeared on his face. What is she doing? That doesn't make sense. Sunny had been able to notice two unexpected things from how Neffys fought against Castor. The first one was rather easy to spot. While Castor did not use the full extent of his incredible speed, he did use a fair share of it, making it almost impossible for Neffys to win any of their matches. She lost much more than she won, almost always by a few fractions of a second. Which was seemingly not conducive to training at all. What was the point of training iPhone if the participants had almost no chance of winning because of how large the gap between them and their opponent was? There was a reason why Neff had never used Sunny as a sparring partner in the past, after all. But then, with a bit of amusement, he realized that Changing Star was doing exactly what he had done with the Stone Saint. She was tempering herself against an overwhelming force. That's she had instructed Castor Taus just enough of his aspect ability to always be much faster than her. Losing in a fight against a superior opponent was truly the best way to learn. So IWA's right in my approach, after all. If Changing Star was doing the same, he had to be right. The second thing he had noticed, however, was much more perplexing. It was that Neffys was not using her usual flowing and unpredictable battle style. Instead, she was moving with precise and firm elegance, hiding behind a carefully woven wall of defense and patiently waiting for an opening to appear, instead of creating one herself. While intricate and impressive, this style was still a bit lacking in comparison to her real one. What is more, while it was deliberate and dependable, it was also rigid. If there was one thing that Neffys would never tolerate in her battle art, it was rigidity. Her whole worldview was built around the idea that nothing had more value than adaptability. The style she had taught Sunny suited her soul. It was designed to be the epitome of changeability. So, the question was, Why the hell she was using something solely in Toho against Caster? The answer was pretty obvious. Either Neffys was trying to experiment with something new in an effort to adopt elements of this style into her own, which didn't seem very likely. Or she didn't want Caster to know her true combat style too well, for some reason. But what could that reason be? Sunny rubbed his chin. Interesting. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 214 to 214, Transient Shadow. 1007 words. Did Neffys distrust Caster for some reason? Sunny surely did, and to be entirely honest, he didn't even need any reason to do so. His intuition and general paranoia were enough. But Changing Star was different. He had learned a bitter lesson and now knew that everything she ever did had a firm logic behind it. Even if that logic was entirely different from that of a normal person. Swaff Neffys was hiding her true battle style from Caster, there was a reason for it. But it didn't make any sense. From everything else that she had done, he was her most trusted lieutenant. Changing Star entrusted more to Caster than she ever had to anyone else. Caster himself also had never acted against Neff's interests. In fact, he was even a bit too loyal. The bastard was always near Neffys, asked how glued to her side. Helso didn't seem to like ITWHE and others got too close to her. In that regard, he was almost like that flying rapier off Cassie's. During their entire day on the Marble Arch, the unfriendly Echo somehow always managed to remain between the blind girl and any man who tried to approach her for whatever reason. The message it was sending was quite clear. I'm watching you. It was honestly rather comical. Sunny shook his head. The dynamic of Changing Star's relationship with Caster was really weird. But once again, he didn't have enough information to make any conclusions. All he could do was keep his eyes open and try to sleep with one of them open when the handsome legacy was on watch duty. Maybe it was some strange legacy thing, like guarding the secrets of the clan against the prying eyes of other clans. Who knew? Glancing at the fighting swordsman, Sunny suddenly got an idea. After considering it for Abbott, he looked at them again. This time, his eyes were burning. That actually might work. The problem with his technique at the moment was that it lacked true individuality. Sunny knew that there was a secret hiding inside his shadow that could become the foundation of his own unique battle style. He just couldn't understand what that secret was. His progress at deciphering it had stalled. While training, Sunny had trouble keeping his eyes both on the Stone Saint and on the shadow. Whenever he tried, the taciturn knight would inevitably send him into a zia of pain. But even if he managed it somehow, there was an invisible wall standing between him and anything even remotely resembling understanding. He was in need of a breakthrough. So what if his shadows tried to imitate someone else instead of him? And not just someone, but aerial sword expert in the middle of a fight. Not only would Sunny be able to observe every tiny detail of FIT's movements, but there would also be something to compare them against. The shadow was a part of him, after all. It was hard to tell where Sunny ended and the shadow began. That's the difference in how it moved and how he moved was almost imperceptible. But if it followed someone else, he would be able to separate the cadence and pattern of that person's movements from the shadows by contrasting it against his own. This had to work. Burning with anticipation, Sunny waited for Neffys and Caster to take a short break, and then send the shadow over to the handsome legacy. Leisurely strolling over the white marble, the shadow approached Caster and brazenly glued itself to his feet. Then, it crossed its arms and glared at the legacy with almost palpable disdain. Caster stared at the shadow for a couple of seconds and then raised his head to look at Sunny. There was a very strange expression on his face. What are you doing? His voice did not sound happy at all. Sunny shrugged with a carefree smile. Oh, didn't mean him. This cretin just lost me an ascended soul shard. As a form of punishment, Ivy decided to make him your shadow for Abbott. So, just do your thing and don't worry about it. The shadow turned its head and pierced him with a menacing look. Sunny could practically hear its thoughts. Who are you calling a cretin, you cretin? That had to bait. Did I guess right? Huh. Oh, sorry. I forgot you cannot answer. Not paying the offended shadow any more attention, he just smiled wider. Caster frowned, hesitated for a few moments, and then said through gritted teeth. I would prefer if you wouldn't. Sunny sighed. Alright, whatever. With that, he gave the shadow the command to leave the proud legacy alone. It separated itself from Caster, pretended to wipe its legs in disgust, and sauntered over to Neffys, only to get attached to her feet with visible delight. I'd even bowed gallantly to her own shadow and made sure to not get in its way. What is this moron doing? Of course, Sunny had ordered the shadow to approach Neff himself. But he didn't expect it to be visibly pleased by it. It was as if the shadow was simply beyond itself to finally follow someone competent. You traitor. Neffys looked down on the shadow, smiled, and didn't say anything. Well, good. Now, fight. The two legacies did not make him wait long. A few moments later, they were once again locked in a furious battle. Only this time, two shadows were following Neffys. Both of them loyally imitated her movements, however, one of them was slightly, almost imperceptibly, different. Sunny looked at it with an intensity that threatened to burn two holes in the white marble. Soon, his eyes widened. I see it. I think I see it. There, in the tiniest difference between the way Changing Star Sound shadow moved and the way his shadow moved, he finally saw it. He had found his breakthrough. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 215 to 215, Shapeless. 1144 words. Observing the motions of two shadows that followed Neffys, Sunny was finally able to understand the foundation of the elusive shadow style. Before, he only sensed AHINTOFIT's essence. Heck knew that just like the shadow, the hidden battle art was insidious, shapeless, and ever-changing. But this was where lay the problem. A battle style was, by definition, a structured framework of patterns and principles, a doctrine that dictated how one should act to defeat an enemy. That doctrine was used as a foundation and expanded into a variety of specific movements to create a style. But if something didn't have a shape and its form was constantly changing, how could it be bestable and structured? Sunny had no idea how the concepts Heffeld were at the core of the shadow style could create something even remotely applicable to practice. Insidious, shapeless, ever-changing. What was he supposed to do with that? But now, he understood. The key to it was so simple and evident that he almost laughed. Why had Hennett guessed earlier? It was so obvious. The idea that tied everything together was innate to the nature of shadows' as formlessness and elusiveness. It was imitation. After all, what were the first two things that came to mind when one thought about shadows? That they lived in the dark and imitated the things that hid them from light. The foundation of the shadow style was indeed insidious, shapeless, and ever-changing. Its core concept was to steal that which made the enemy strong and use it to destroy them. To master that style, he had to learn how to behave like a shadow. Sunny stared at Nephis and Castor, but didn't see them. His mind was consumed completely by the sudden revelation. He had no time to pay attention to their fight anymore. This style had endless potential. If he managed to master it, he would be able to counter any style or technique used against him, not to mention become an immensely unpredictable opponent. What could be more unpredictable than a formless shadow? Of course, it was easier said than done. To begin with, while the ability to imitate the enemy was incredibly powerful, it also demanded an incredible amount of talent, experience, and insight from the user. You couldn't imitate that which you didn't understand, after all. More importantly, this was just the foundation of the style. He still had to expand it into the actual collection of specific principles, and retrain himself accordingly. That was a mammoth task. Creating a complete style from scratch could take a true battle master years, if not decades. Sunny had not even scratched the surface of this ambitious undertaking. However, this was all right. It was a start. Personal battle arts were not created in an instant, anyway. It was a long and arduous process, with endless iterations coming and going while being tempered by the crucible of combat. It's not like the style would bucellus until it became perfect. Sunny just had to get it to the point where it could be applied in battle in one form or another. That alone would tremendously enhance his technique. Hesmalt, congratulating himself. However, the next moment, a deep scowl appeared on his face. But how, exactly, am I supposed to do that? A while later, when the sun was already touching the western horizon, Sunny was sitting by himself and staring at the shadow. He was motionless like a statue and deep in thought. On his face, there was a troubled frown. When someone approached him, Sunny lingered for a few moments and then slowly looked up to see who was disturbing him. To his surprise, it was Nephis. The leader of their cohort stood there for Abbott, her graceful figure illuminated by the setting sun. Then, she sat down near him. Sunny blinked. Hey Neph. Nephis gave him a nod. Hey, Sunny, he waited for a few moments, and then asked. Did you want something? The corner of her mouth slightly curled upward. With a sigh, Changing Star glanced at them and said. It's nothing much. I just wanted to say that I saw you fighting in the catacombs. You have improved a lot in this 3 months. Well done. Sunny smiled. Well, it's not like there's a lot of opportunities to lead a peaceful life in the Dark City. I was bound to improve a little. No. She shook her head. Didn't sell yourself short. You really did well. Very few would have been able to grow so much and as fast as you. Especially without a teacher. After hesitating for a while, Sunny shrugged. You said it yourself. One real battle is worth more than 1,000 hours of training. There were a lot of battles. In those 3 months, Nephis nodded, and then asked. That firm and grounded style you weaved into your technique, where did it come from? He scratched the back of his head and, remembering the hellish training sessions with his pet monster, held back the urge to shiver. I just observed how the Stone Saint fought and tried to replicate it. Changing Star smiled. As I thought, I've seen her fight, too. It's a very formidable echo, one of the finest I've ever seen. Coming from a legacy, this meant a lot. Sunny was indeed really lucky to be in the right place at the right time to get the echo of the Stone Saint. If the fallen siblings of the Iron Spiders had not brought her to the brink of death, he would never have been able to survive a battle with a living statue, let alone defeat her. He was even luckier to have a divine aspect that allowed him to turn echoes into creatures that were even more fearsome. All in all, Sunny was extremely fortunate. His fortune was exactly as incredible as his misfortune. He grinned. You know my attributes. Edo did lucky a lot. She lingered for a few moments, and then said, I'm glad that you were able to understand the true design of the battle style it taught you. So he was right on this point, too. The style Changing Star had given him was indeed designed to be as adaptable as possible and seamlessly incorporate elements of other styles. It was a perfect foundational battle art, for those talented enough to make use of it, of course. Which were, most likely, extremely few and far between. Sunny glanced at Nephis and, after some deliberation, asked, That style of yours is truly unique. Where did it come from? He had been too inexperienced to realize this at the time, but what Neph had taught him could have been considered a rare treasure. The style he took for granted was, in fact, a work of pure genius. It deserved to be famous and ubiquitous. But it was not, which suggested that this treasure was a secret one. Changing Star lingered for Abbott, and then said, It's a part of my inheritance. Sunny blinked and stared at her, stunned. Then why the hell did she teach it home? Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 216 to 216, Tacit Understanding. 1047 words. Sunny stared at Nephis with a complicated expression. After a while, he asked, Why did you entrust me with something so precious? She glanced at them, lingered for a few moments, then shrugged. We had a deal, remember, my knowledge in exchange for your share of the spoils we earn. There had indeed existed such a deal. However, he had not exactly acted in good faith when proposing it. After all, he had news for those spoils, in the first place. Sunny scowled. If Changing Star had really revealed a family secret to him because Ophelie, she had a valid reason to be resentful of him. Just like he was off her. With a dark smile, he looked away and said, You must have realized by now that I have cheated you in that deal. Nephis turned to him and said, her voice calm and even, You mean the fact that you didn't need to absorb soul shards to grow stronger? Sunny froze for a moment, then gave her a nod. You didn't seem very surprised. Figures. When Sunny first learned about this ability of his, he was stunned. But Neph seemed talk now a lot more than a normal person did. She didn't even try to pretend otherwise. It's a very rare aspect trait, but not unheard of among the upper echelons of the awakened. In fact, I am capable of something like that myself. Although your case does seem to be especially unique. Sunny glanced at her. How so? Changing Star remained silent for a few moments and then said, her voice hinted with a bit of wonder. Usually, when an awakened absorbs the soul essence directly, the process leaves the remnants of the soul core empty. But when you doit, the shards are left brimming with it. This Ivory, unusual, He shifted uncomfortably, and then said, yeah, well, you have your share of secrets, too, Neff. Didn't think that it didn't notice. Lineage memories, domains. Neffy's interrupted him with a heavy gaze. When Sunny fell silent and looked at her with a frown, she said in a strangely somber tone. Never say those words aloud again, Sunny. I am serious. Just knowing them might get you killed. He stared at her for a long time, and then scoffed. No problem. Since you showed Meth courtesy of not prying into my secrets, I won't pry into yours. I didn't really want talk now, anyway. The mysterious, upper echelons, you mentioned can play their dirty little games all they want, as long as you leave me out of them. Then, Sunny frowned and added, but there is one question I have to ask you, because it involves me personally. She raised an eyebrow. Sure, ask away. He grimaced. Why are you hiding the true core of your technique from Castor? Changing Star looked at them for habit, and then smiled. So you've noticed. That is good, too. Yes, I've been using a different style when facing Castor. Sunny looked at her with a humorless expression. Why? She shrugged. Why did you incorporate elements of the Stone Saint's technique into your own? He shook his head. To become stronger. Also, nice try Adama's direction, but I won't fall for your tricks. I'm the one who taught them to you, remember? So just stop. Answer my question. Neffy sighed and turned away, glancing at the silhouette of the crimson spire that loomed in the distance. After a while, she said, I'll answer you when we return to the Dark City. It won't change anything until then, anyway. Your safety won't be compromised in any way. What is that supposed to mean? Ash glared at her. Changing Star stood Yupan turned to leave. Before that, however, she lingered for a moment and said, keep sharpening your sword, Sunny. I expect big things from you. With that, she walked away, leaving him speechless. And what does she mean by that? After Neffy's left, Sunny returned to staring at the shadow. However, despite the fact that he had figured out the essence and foundation of the elusive battle art that hid inside it, he had no idea how to go about creating an actual style out of them. He did not have enough experience and mastery to be able to create something out of nothing. It was a dead end. Curses. Why even hide that damn mystery inside the aspect if he can do anything with it? Perhaps in the distant future, he would be able to. But right now, it was asked how he had found the door, but was not strong enough to turn the key and unlock it. It just stood there and teased him endlessly, just like the damn gateway inside the Crimson Spire. It was pure torture. Maybe I wasn't supposed to notice the existence of the hidden style so soon. But headed, and who worked so hard to gain insight into its secrets. Was evil for nothing. All the pain, all the effort. Why would spell Dothis Tohim? Do you have to ask? That's the damn spell we're talking about. Why wouldn't I do something like this to you? With a bitter sigh, Sunny turned away and tried to forget all about the shadow, techniques, and battle styles. It was almost dark, anyway. Time to sleep. Walking over to the center of the marble arch, Sunny lay down beside the other members of the cohort and tiredly closed his eyes. The beach vacation was over. It was funny, visually stunning, and unexpectedly emotional, but ended on a bitter note. Tomorrow was going to be another long day. To hell with this. Exhausted by a low fit, he fell asleep before even finishing the thought. This crap. Sunny opened his eyes and looked around in confusion. The world was enveloped in astrange, dim twilight. Deep shadows surrounded him, shrouding the tall walls that were cut from black marble. Looking between the mighty columns, Sunny saw the black circle of the sun burning in the lightless sky. An eclipse. No, wait, what walls? What columns? Was he supposed to be sleeping at the top of the white arch? What was happening? Suddenly, a woman screamed toward the silence like a sharp knife. It was full of pain and suffering. Sunny tried to summon the midnight shard into his hand, only to realize that he had no hands. Then, something else resounded from the darkness. A baby's cry. What the? Almost at the same time, Sunny realized something terrible. This was a dream. He was dreaming. People were not supposed to dream in the dream realm. Single quote. Not good. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 217 to 217, Origin. 1040 words. When Sunny realized that he was dreaming, the first thing that came to his mind was that there was another soul tree growing somewhere near the White Arch. However, after a few moments of panic, he quickly dismissed this idea. After all, he had never actually dreamt while under the mind hex of the ancient fiend. He had just mistaken the broken memories of his conversation with Cassie for a dream. But this one was real. The dreamscape that surrounded Sunny was ephemeral, shifting, and shrouded in shadows. Above him, the sun was like a circle of darkness, with crimson light drowning in a burning sea of clouds. However, none of that light reached him. In the tenebrous hall of black marble, there was nothing but empty silence. Which was now destroyed by the sound of a baby crying, of course. The woman's screams had long grown silent. Peering into the Stygian depths of the dark marble hall, Sunny saw nothing but endless shadows. The baby's cries were coming from somewhere beyond them, or from within them. A subtle thought entered Sunny's mind. The monumental walls, the colossal columns, the grandiose hall, all of it looked strangely familiar. Asked how he had already been here once, a long time ago. All that was missing were the signs of desolation in a large altar cut from a single block of black marble. In fact, it should have been standing right where the crying sounds were coming from. Familiar words appeared in his mind, now full of new meaning. Single quote. Child of shadows. In the next moment, everything disappeared. The world was swaying. A seemingly endless surface of black stone was flowing past his vision, moving Yupan down. No, it wasn't the stone, but Sunny himself. He was the one swaying. What? In fact, Sunny found himself in the body of a toddler. He was currently held gently by a young woman who was walking down a long stone corridor, which was dimly lit by burning torches. Hence, the swaying. The girl was very young, not older than Sunny himself, his actual body, that is. She was slender and exquisitely beautiful, with soft porcelain skin and long raven hair. The lissom beauty was dressed in a flowing silk tunic that left her delicate neck and shoulders exposed. A black serpent was coiled around her arms and neck, its scales so intricately tattooed that sometimes it seemed asked how the creature was moving. Whoever marked the girl's skin with this image was a true genius of their craft. Sunny had never seen anything like it in the real world. However, he had seen similar markings in a nightmare. This was the mark of a slave who belonged to the shadow god. The young girl was a temple slave, just like he had been in his first nightmare. The serpent coiled around her neck and arms served both as her collar and her shackles. She was also the toddler, Smother. Sunny could tell from the love with which she held the child and the quiet smile that appeared on her face every time she looked at them. Sunny might have lost his own mother at a young age, but he still remembered that much, at least. If the mother is a slave, then the child is, too. Finally, Sunny began to understand what was happening to him. The dream he found himself in did not belong to him. Instead, it belonged to the nameless temple slave whose role he had assumed during the first nightmare. The original child of shadows. This vision was his memory. Soon, the young girl entered a vast hall that was shrouded in darkness. Judging by the black marble walls, they were in another part of the ancient temple. Sunny couldn't see much of his surroundings, but he could somehow tell that they were underground. In the center of the hall, 7 tall braziers were burning with strange, pale flames. One the edges of light, motionless, stood Ados and Orsa people. Sunny shivered, suddenly reminded of the silent shadows populating his soul sea. However, these were not ghosts, but humans. There were several other slaves, while the rest appeared to be priests. To tell the truth, there was not a lot of difference between them. It seemed asked how the servants of the shadow god did not pursue opulence and status. In fact, many of the priests bore the same markings as slaves, suggesting that they themselves had belonged to the temple once. What are they doing here? What is happening? Approaching one of the elder slaves, the young beauty entrusted the child to her. Separated from the warmth of his mother's chest, the toddler, Sunny, felt cold and scared. However, the older woman consoled him with gentle words, preventing the child from crying. Then, she moved back to stand with the rest of the people gathered in the underground hall. Their faces were calm and solemn. The young woman, meanwhile, slowly walked into the circle of light. Her movements were elegant, flowing, and graceful. Stopping at the very center, she stood motionlessly between the 7 pale flames, surrounded by 7 shadows. Sunny stared at the beautiful slave, feeling that something important was about to happen. But, what? Asha became pensive and uneasy. A sudden sound broke the silence. It was the deep and reverberating ringing ophazither. As musical instruments sang, the slave girl suddenly moved. As he did, her 7 shadows moved with her. This is. With his eyes wide open, Sunny watched the young woman. She was dancing. The beautiful slave danced in the circle of light surrounded by impenetrable darkness, her every move full of indescribable grace and clear, but elusive purpose. Her young body was flexible and lithe, but also strong and trained as much as warriors. Her skill as a dancer was like that of a battle master. It was mesmerizing. The young woman weaved a beautiful pattern with her movements, their cadence and nature simultaneously firm and flowing, sharp and gentle, clear and unpredictable. She danced alone but also with 7 partners, effortlessly controlling both her own body and the 7 shadows cast by it. At times, it was hard to tell which one of them was real. Her dance was insidious, shapeless, and ever-changing. Sunny froze. He recognized these movements. They were the same as show his shadow moved. This was the source and origin of the battle style he wanted to create. This was Shadow Dance. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 218 to 218, Shadow Dance. 1102 words. Sunny opened his eyes. The grand arch of white marble was exactly the same as when he had last seen it. The sun was already climbing the gray dome of the sky, chasing the remnants of the dark sea away. The rest of the cohort had woken up some time ago and were now preparing for the journey ahead. He had overslept. However, it didn't matter. With eyes burning with excitement, Sunny sat up and recalled everything that he had witnessed in his dream. The memories were still there, clear as day. Heckled recall every movement, every step, every breath of the dance that the beautiful slave had performed. The nameless slave's mother. His eyes dimmed slightly. That dream of his, while a precious gift, was also a source of numerous questions. Now that he was awake, Sunny was able to see a few things with more clarity. The scene that he had witnessed at the very beginning of it was that of the nameless slaves, the original child of Shadow's birth. He was born during a solar eclipse, not unlike Sunny. That fact put a lot of things into perspective. Everyone knew that the spell did not choose the role an aspirant would play during their first nightmare randomly. That was apparent from the fact that the bodies they inhabited in it, while different, were very close to their real ones. However, the actual principle of how the spell chose these roles and the events of the nightmares were largely unclear. But now, Sunny knew that He shared more than simply outer appearance with the temple slave whose body he inhabited for a few short days. Both of them were born in similar, extremely rare circumstances. Both of them were at the very bottom of society, oppressed and unwanted, surviving against all odds instead of because of them. Both of them were left without a family at a young age. The tough life in the outskirts took Sunny's parents and sister away. The nameless slave, it was the servants of the mighty war god that destroyed his childhood home and life. Sunny didn't know what happened to the beautiful dancer after the last temple of shadows was destroyed by them. But he doubted that it was anything good. With a heavy sigh, he looked down. Fate. It was fate. What he shared with the temple slave was a similarity of it. Sunny was growing more and more convinced that the spell was connected to the strings of fate in some way. Perhaps it was weaved from them. Remembering the void he had found himself in after completing his first trial, Sunny looked into the distance with wonder. That void was filled with a myriad of stars that served as nexuses for an inconceivably complex net made of countless strings of silver light. Were those the strings of it? He shook his head. Whatever they were, and whatever the spell was, it was not something he could know or understand, yet. Numerous people, most of them better informed and smarter than him, had tried and failed. It was wiser to concentrate on something within his reach. The shadow dance. Sunny smiled. He wasn't so engrossed by the dancing of the beautiful slave girl because it was truly stunning and enchanting. He was riveted beyond belief by it because he recognized the pattern of the battle style hiding in his shadow in her graceful movements. Turns out, it wasn't a battle art at all. It was a dance. But was there a difference? Not in this case, not really. It wasn't a coincidence that people often describe the way true masters of battle fought as dancing. At their core, fighting and dance were very close. Fancy combat, when brought to a truly impressive level, was like a dance. So he couldn't dance, when mastered to perfection, be like a battle art. Sunny was certain that he was right. He had already comprehended the essence of shadow dance and gained insight into its foundation. With the memory of the beautiful dancer moving a song with her 7 shadows, Hino had the last piece of the puzzle, the actual set of moves and principles that he could use to create an actual battle style in their image. He didn't have the battle art yet, but had now possess all the components needed to create it. Of course, it was not going to be easy. Even with all that knowledge stored in his mind, he would still have to spend a lot of time and effort and spill a lot of blood, both his own and that of his enemies, to turn the graceful dance of the beautiful slave girl into a deadly dance of steel. It wasn't even certain that he would succeed. But Sunny would be damned if he wasn't going to try. Shadow dance would become his personal battle art. He was going to make it happen. As if echoing his last thought, the familiar voice of the spell suddenly whispered into his ear. When Sunny heard what it said, his eyes widened. You have received an aspect legacy, shadow dance. Sunny stared into the emptiness, stunned to his core by what the spell had just whispered. Aspect legacy, did it really just say those words? Hegel. Aspect legacy was something that every aspect contained, but very few awakened ever received. Unlike the boon of the first nightmare, and every nightmare after that, as well as rewards sleepers received after returning from the dream realm for the first time, each aspect legacy had unique set of requirements that the owner of the aspect had to meet to unlock it. When they did, they were rewarded with a powerful relic. Usually, it was a memory that synergized perfectly with their aspect abilities, or sometimes even an echo. Legacy clans weren't called that accidentally. While not every clan possessed an aspect legacy, most of them did. In fact, it was the acquisition of the aspect legacy that laid the foundation for the creation of many of these clans. By now, some of the most powerful clans even had several. But getting an aspect legacy was not an easy feat. Most of them were received by saints, followed by master, and only a few were won by mere awakened. Getting the aspect legacy while still being a sleeper, that was simply unheard of. Just like getting a true name during the first nightmare, I guess. Sunny couldn't believe his luck. Of course, he worked bitterly hard to be able to grasp it. And yet, the magnitude of the harvest he reaped was utterly unbelievable. However, why was his aspect legacy not a memory, but a battle art? That was really strange. Not wasting any time, Sunny summoned the runes and hungrily searched for new ones. What has made him tremble? Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 219 to 219, Relics of the Past. 978 words. Right there in the glimmering field of familiar runes, in the cluster describing his aspect, a new string of them appeared. Aspect, Shadow Slave, Aspect Rank, Divine, Aspect Abilities, Shadow Control, Aspect Legacy, Shadow Dance. As soon as Sunny concentrated on the Aspect Legacy, new runes shined to describe it. Shadow Dance description, once an elegant dance, now a deadly battle art. This mysterious style was created by the treacherous lost from light after witnessing a graceful slave dancing with her shadows. Who else could have taken something so beautiful and turned it into something so vile? Sunny coughed, trying hard not to think too much about the manner in which the spell had described him. Again with this treacherous stuff, I'm not that treacherous, okay. So fat I illy, manipulate, and backstab people all the time. That's just being smart. However, what grabbed his attention was not the description itself, but what glimmered beneath it. Shadow Dance Mastery Level, 0/7. First relic, unearned. Second relic, unearned. Third relic. There were a total of 7 lines of runes, each promising him a legacy relic once he achieved the corresponding level of mastery with his newly envisioned battle style. 7 of them, not 1, not even 2 or 3, but 7. Whole legacy clans were created around a single legacy relic. Sunny couldn't even imagine what he would be able to do with 7. Start a family and turn it into the most powerful clan in the world. No, that would mean putting all his eggs into one basket. Better create several clans. Right, why start a family when you can start 7? Wait, no, that didn't sound right. Right, consumed by avarice, Sunny looked at the rising sun with an excited grin. This was great, this was incredible. However, his excitement was short-lived. Yeah, right, I would have to get back to the real world first. And that's not going to happen. Turning his head slightly, Hess stared at the distant silhouette of the Crimson Spire and lost himself in thought. A while later, Effie's voice brought him back to reality. Hey, doofus, breakfast is ready. Why are spacing out and smiling like an idiot? Sunny answered without thinking, just thinking about creating a legacy clan. Have you ever thought about creating a clan? Huh, Effie. The robust huntress stared at them for a few seconds with a strange expression and then grinned. Quote. Ice that an invitation. Still lost in thought, Sunny tilted his head and glanced at her astutely. Huh, not bad, not bad. The choice of a partner has to be of utmost importance when starting a legacy clan. Take Effie, for example. She is Avery fearsome awakened. Her aspect is extravagant and powerful beyond belief. Plus, her physique is nothing short of divine. Any heir she gives birth to's bound to be bought strong and gorgeous. Avery's suitable candidate, I guess. Quote. Huh, what? No, not an invitation. Just considering different options. At that moment, Sunny suddenly realized that he had been unceremoniously ogling Effie Pan down for a better half of a minute, and that her grin had long turned dangerous at some point. The huntress stretched her neck and said lazily, I see, so you have chosen death. He blinked. No, wait, it didn't mean it like that. I was just, theorizing. The unruly huntress cracked her knuckles and smiled menacingly. Oh, so you were, theorizing, about me, huh? Don't tell, no, wait, stop, stow. Surprisingly, Sunny survived, barely. Soon after that, they left the grandiose marble arch and continued their journey into the depths of the labyrinth. Before the expedition started, Neffis had told him that they had a fast and comparatively safe way to reach the southern edges of the Forgotten Shore, as much as anything could be safe in this cursed place. Without it, getting to their destination would have taken them months. Now that they had left the Dark City, Sunny finally decided to satisfy his curiosity and asked what that mysterious method of traveling with incredible speed was. When he heard the answer, he just stared blankly at Changing Star for a few minutes, trying to guess if she was kidding or not. She wasn't. In the end, he didn't even ask any questions and just waved his hand dejectedly. There was no point. If Neffys had come talk now of this secret from Cassie's visions and believed that it was doable, then he'd not have to worry too much. It's not like he could turn back now, anyway. Plus, the expedition had shown itself to be extremely lucrative for him so far. Mere days after its start, he had already gotten plenty of shadow fragments and an ascended memory, not to mention making a breakthrough in his exploration of battle styles and earning an aspect legacy for his effort. In any case, they had to travel about a week's worth of time south to get the chance to access that fast method of travel. The heights they were going to house on the way as shelters during the nights there were planned in advance with the help of the Forgotten Shore map Neffys had created. To make sure that these shelters were really where the map showed and remove any possibility of ending up stranded in the middle of the labyrinth with no way to escape the Dark Sea, she had even employed Kai during the week that Sunny had spent with Effie. The charming archer scouted the way ahead and confirmed that her map was correct. Now, the only danger they really faced from the Forgotten Shore itself was that Ophacidon storm. However, with a true oracle in the ranks of the cohort, this danger was dramatically diminished. Now that Cassie had grown into her powers and absorbed a lot of soul essence, she was often able to warn them in advance if something like that was going to happen. There were also the usual perils of the labyrinth, of course. And as he went deeper into its deadly maze, the situation slowly began to turn from bad to worse. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 220 to 220. So you're a spider, so what? 1180 words. As he ventured deeper into the southern reaches of the Crimson Labyrinth, the situation slowly turned worse and worse. The iron spiders that had been not too threatening to the cohort of powerful, experienced Dark City hunters at the start of it all were growing more and more deadly with each step of the way. Their numbers grew exponentially, becoming aerial danger pretty soon. More and more often bigger and stronger monsters appeared at the head of the attacking beasts, bringing with them all sorts of problems. What a source, the spiderweb they used to trap their prey was changing, too. The metal wires from which it was weaved became so thin that it was at times almost impossible to notice it, and sharp enough to cut through armor and bone, while maintaining the resilience of superb steel. The whole labyrinth was covered in it, turning from crimson to gray. The cohort bled much more because of the invisible webs than they did because of the spiders themselves. Of course, the iron spiders were cunning creatures, too. More often than not, they only attacked once one of the humans was caught in their nets, leading to a few really harrowing experiences for the members of Changing Star's party. And there was a wide variety of other terrifying creatures waiting to ambush them in the twisting pathways of the Crimson Coral, too. What made them so dangerous was that the cohort didn't know anything about their anatomy and abilities. Every fight was a gamble, often resulting in one or several of them sustaining serious wounds. There were three things that made the situation somewhat bearable. The first one was Neffys and her healing flames. Although using the aspect ability took at all one their leader, it was often worth it, especially iPhone of the members of the cohort received wounds that limited their mobility. One thing was far more dangerous than any nightmare creature that lived in the labyrinth, and it was not reaching safety before the torrent of black water flooded the Forgotten Shore, bringing inconceivable horrors with it. Thanks to Neff, they didn't have to worry about anyone slowing the cohort down. The second reason, unexpectedly, was the iron spiders themselves. Because of the peculiar way they hunted, a lot of creatures found their deaths in the cutting embrace of the wire spiderwebs. Finding these eviscerated corpses or cocoons containing old carcasses became a common occurrence once the party invaded the depths of the spider territory. Thanks to that, 6 humans were able to study and anticipate many of the monsters they had to face in this region of the labyrinth. A lot of potentially deadly surprises had been avoided due to the cohort stumbling onto a corpse of a similar creature prior to fighting against a living one and spending some time to learn about its strengths and weaknesses. The third reason was the blood arrow. In the hands of an experienced archer, it was almost as deadly as it would have been in the hands of an inexperienced one, the difference being that the latter would mostly be danger to themselves, quickly turning into a bloodless husk. The first time Kai had used it, Sunny experienced a disturbing feeling of shock. That time, they were facing a large group of iron spiders led by a much larger arachnid, the awakened monster of their tribe, similar in status to a carapace centurion. These creatures were much heavier and more powerful, with thick plates of iron armor covering their bodies almost completely. Even Castor's enchanted sword had trouble cutting through their defenses. What a source, due to the speed with which the wretched abominations moved, it was especially hard to catch them in a gap between the armor plates. Sunny was facing 2 smaller iron spiders at once while the stone saint was butchering the third one. With his shadow observing what was happening behind his back, he didn't miss the moment when the cunning awakened monster suddenly disengaged from Neffys and dashed into his direction, its mandibles moving in anticipation of tasting human flesh. Calmly preparing to dodge, Sunny tensed his muscles and narrowed his eyes. Whistling over his shoulder, a menacing black arrow suddenly streaked through the air. Its shaft was made out of dark polished wood, with black feathers for fletching and a vicious white arrowhead that seemed to be from pale white bone, like a sharp fang of some terrible creature. The arrow easily pierced the thick iron plate protecting the spider and tore deep into his body. Even though Kai messed Euphis shot Abbott and hit the monster in its abdomen instead of the head, the results were nothing short of harrowing. In the next moment, the awakened monster suddenly slowed down and staggered. Then, it tried to lunge forward once again, but ended up losing its balance and weakly falling to the ground. Its limbs moved slightly, quickly losing any form of cohesion. Their movements grew slower and then stopped. Beneath the iron plates, the spider's body grew taut and shriveled, like that of a mummy. Soon, it seemed completely drained. Sunny blinked, shaken by this disturbing image, and couldn't help but glance briefly at his forearm. If not for the blood weave, he might have ended up as a shriveled corpse, too. He would have gone through with cutting off his arm and survived, most likely. But if had been a couple of seconds too late. Better not to think about. Anyway, he was glad that the blood arrow was on their side now. Not too far away from him, gliding through the air, Kai suddenly made a strange gasping sound. Sunny didn't know what it felt like to have your blood magically drained and then suddenly returned to your body, but he doubted that it was pleasant. Also, there was this question, if Kyblood was used to create the arrow and then returned Tohim, if Fahad hit his mark, of course, then, where did the blood drained from the prey go? Hua sense that Huan did talk now. In any case, with Nightingale in possession of the morbid ascended memory, their battles with iron spiders and other inhabitants of the labyrinth became a bit less perilous. The blood arrow did not have any enchantments that needed to be activated by manipulating soul essence, such charming archer could use it to its full potential. Although Sunny was still a bit bitter about having to give such a menacing weapon away, he was now more confident than ever that his decision was the right one. Just like that, 6 more days passed by. During this time, he didn't gain any new memories, but managed to accumulate 18 more shadow fragments, bringing his total to 340. He was still not as strong physically as Shahad been before creating the Shadow Saint, but getting closer and closer. In the evening of the 6th day, bloodied and exhausted, the cohort had finally approached the goal of the first leg of their expedition. Looking at it, Sunny couldn't help but stop in his tracks. His eyes slightly widened. Of course, share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 221 to 221, Zenith. 1,210 words. In front of them, the ground was shattered, creating a titanic fracture. The canyon was so deep and vast that Sunny had to strain his eyes to see the other side of it. Crimson coral clung to its walls, spilling over the edge like a torrent of blood. A long time ago, a graceful bridge of white stone connected the two sides of the canyon together. Now, however, it was broken, with only its base remaining in place. Looking at the bridge, Sunny realized that there must have been an ancient road somewhere beneath their feet. Idled directly to the main gates of the ancient city, moving across the colossal canyon by means of the miraculous bridge and passing beneath the grandiose arch of white marble. Come to think of it, the headless knight, the ashen barrow, and the graceful woman whose hands had saved him twice were also situated in a straight line. Perhaps there was another road leading east, too. However, this thought disappeared from his head as quickly as that appeared. All his attention was drawn to the remnants of the stone bridge, where stood another giant statue. Right above the weathered ruin stood a colossal stone warrior. He was clad in an archaic cuirass, with a beautiful spear resting on his shoulder. The warrior was facing south, asked how greeting the travelers who traveled on the road to reach the ancient city. Of course, his head was missing. More than that, the whole statue was covered in vast sheets of dull gray spiderweb, as if dressed in a solemn burial shroud. Sunny shivered, afraid to imagine what kind of creature was capable of creating the thick metal cables of the web that encompassed the stone colossus. Noticing his expression, Effie smiled. Scary, huh? Sunny gave her an nod, hoping against all hope that they would not have to find out the answer to his question. For once, his hopes were not shattered to pieces. The vivacious huntress sighed. I haven't seen it myself, but I heard stories of the creature that used to make its nest here. It was the mother of all these damnable spiders we've been dealing with for the past week. A huge menace of a nightmare creature, as big as a house and utterly deadly. Armored like a hover tank, too. Sunny gulped and cast a sideways look at Nephis. What's a hover tank? Effie blinked a couple of times, then answered in an amused tone. Oh, right, your Ash'll drop out, I almost forgot. You've seen a PTV before, right? PTV stands for a personal transport vehicle, as you know. I hope. Well, a tank is sort of like that, only much bigger and heavier, with thick armor and a kinetic or energy cannon installed on it. The government sometimes employs them to support awakened when agate opens near populated areas. Sunny tried to imagine such a vehicle and hazily remembered seeing something like this on the news when he was a kid. Mostly, these tanks Effie had described were shown opened like tin cans, with their crews pulled out and eaten by attacking monsters. Heshivered, mundane people had no business fighting against nightmare creatures. To be completely honest, even awakened had no business facing them. It's just that they had no other choice. Quote. We're not going to tree and kill that big spider, are we? Effie laughed. Actually, it's your lucky day. We won't be meeting the spider mommy. In fact, no one ever will. Shesh long dead. Sunny sighed with relief and glanced at the huntress. Yeah, great, but how do you know? She shrugged. She was killed by the second ruler of the Bright Castle, before Huan got himself killed trying to conquer the Crimson Spire. The huntress who showed meth ropes when he arrived on the Forgotten Shore had actually been one of the members of his cohort once, if you can believe it. In fact, she was the one who dealt the finishing blow to that abomination. Effie looked at the giant mass of spider webs and shook her head. It must have been one hell of a battle, huh? Anyway, I'm glad that she did. Thought to show she received the Zenith Shard, which Ethan inherited. Sunny frowned. What exactly are you talking about? The huntress leaned on her beautiful bronze spear and patted its shaft. My spear. It's a tier 5 awakened memory. Sub big bad spider was an awakened tyrant, I guess. Can you imagine? All these creepy crawlers serving a sentient commander. Thank gods it's dead. Sunny looked at her with a dubious expression. Why would that mentor of yours give away such a treasure? Effie was silent for a few moments, then smiled. Ah, we were kind of close. Plus, she had no idea how to say spear. Sorcerers, am I right? In any case, she gave the Zenith Shard tome. Despite her carefree tone, he could tell that that smile was fake. Effie did not let it show, but Sunny could tell that the death of this huntress whose name he didn't even know affected her more than she was telling. Who knows? Since Effie's original cohort had perished in the catacombs, their corpses might still be somewhere there, in those cursed tunnels. However, something else was on his mind. Sunny furrowed his brow. Midnight Shard, Zenith Shard. Was there a connection? He didn't know. There might have been. He had received the Midnight Shard from Nephis, who had gotten it after killing the Carapace demon. The demon, even though it had been enthralled by the Soul Devourer, appeared as leader of the nightmare creature in that region of the labyrinth, just like the brood mother of the iron spiders had been. 2 headless statues, 2 powerful abominations, 2 memories with similar names. Wasn't it a little bit too much to be coincidence? Glancing at Effie, he asked. Was your spear forged from Ashard of a fallen star, by chance? Just Ash said it. Cassie slightly turned her head, listening to their conversation. That small detail told Sunny everything he wanted to talk now. The huntress raised her eyebrows. It was, at least according to its description. Who told you? A corner off Sunny's lips slightly curled upward. No one. I just guessed. With that, he left Effie alone and walked forward. It seemed asked how he was right. There was some hidden meaning behind the names of these two memories. Cassie seemed talk now something about it, and that meant that Neffys did, too. And yet, they chose to keep it from Sunny and the rest of the cohort. He sighed. So this expedition is not as simple as it seems. Not that Iper seemed particularly simple, to begin with. He had guessed a long time ago that Changing Star had some hidden motive to leave the Dark City, but now, his suspicions were as good as confirmed. The smile disappeared from Sunny's face. He didn't like being kept in the dark at all. Kept in the dark, huh? Oh, the irony. At that moment, his shadow reached the base of the giant statue. With a deep frown, Sunny summoned the Midnight Shard and glanced at Neffys, putting all needless thought aside. There's a nest ahead. We will have to destroy it to access the statue. Lots of spiders, some bigger ones, too. She gave him Anid and turned to face the others. We need to clear the nest and climb the statue before the sun sets. Prepare for battle. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 222 to 222, Clearing the Nest. 1,574 words. A clear and melodic sound of bell reverberated through the air above the labyrinth, alerting the monstrous spiders hiding in the enormous cocoon of grey webs that a new prey came knocking on their door. Moments later, swift bodies clad in heavy plates of iron armor shot from beneath the grey spiderweb, moving through the steel wires with terrifying speed. There were enough nightmare creatures in that wave to obliterate anything that stood in their way, seemingly. However, what stood in their way were two figures, one tall and boisterous, the other one on the shorter side and radiating a strange feeling of fine different firmness. They were Effie and the Stone Saint. Both held their shields raised, the tips of their weapons resting on their edges. As Huntress grinned, the shadow silently struck the rim off her shield with the blade off her sword twice. As if answering that call, a vicious black arrow suddenly appeared from somewhere above, hitting the leading spider right in one of its many eyes. The monster's legs buckled, and it fell to the ground, forcing those creatures that followed behind to either dash around or jump over the massive body. A fraction of a second later, the wave of spiders crashed into the small shield wall. A deafening roar of iron striking against iron resounded under the grey skies of the forgotten shore like a thunderclap. Despite the furious force of the assault, Effie and the Stone Saint somehow held, at least for now. As soon as momentum of the iron spiders was slowed down a little, Neffys and Castor appeared out of nowhere and attacked the mass of repulsive creatures from the sides. At the same time, a stone-like sword and a beautiful bronze spear lashed out from behind the shields. Black blood splashed into the air. Meanwhile, Sunny softly landed on the ground behind the nightmare creatures and stealthily moved through the shadows, swiftly approaching them from the back. The Midnight Shard flashed, sending one of the spiders into the embrace of death. You have slain an awakened beast. Without listening to the spell, Sunny used the precious moments before the enemy noticed his presence to wreak as much havoc as possible. His Tachi moved twice more, severing several limbs and heavily wounding another abomination. After that, the spiders finally reacted to his treacherous attack. Not treacherous, just smart. With Effie and the Stone Saint holding the front, Neffys and Castor attacking from the sides, and Sunny closing the trap from behind, the monstrous arachnids were now surrounded from all sides. Well, sort of. Of course, a small group of dormant humans could never hope to truly surround this many superior nightmare creatures, not even with the help of a monster of their own. Trapped or not, as soon as iron spiders had the time to react, they could easily overwhelm and tear them to pieces. Especially Sunny, who was behind the line of these vicious creatures and all alone. If the spiders decided to shift the focus of their attack, he would be dead in seconds. A son-of-their black arrow hit one of the larger spiders in the abdomen. Sunny hissed and dove under a spider scythe, then thrust his sword forward, ruthlessly piercing the head of the beast through its open, salivating mouth. You have. With no time to tear the Midnight Shard from the spider's corpse, Sunny let go its hilt and jumped back, narrowly avoiding being crushed by another ironclad creature. The few seconds of the advantage they had were coming to an end. A moment or two later, the spiders were bound to come to their senses. Even though the cohort had managed to kill 10 or so in this short window of time, there were still enough of the deadly creatures to rip them to shreds. Sunny didn't even have to look at Neffys to feel the shift in her movements. The silent understanding the two of them developed during their journey through the labyrinth many months ago was still there, allowing them to cooperate perfectly without the need to say any words, asked how they were two parts of the same whole. In fact, despite the rift in their relationship, this bond was stronger than ever. Perhaps because they understood each other so much better now. For better or for worse. It was so exhilarating to fight side by side with Changing Star once again. Just before the spiders were able to turn the tide of the battle in their favor, Effie and the Stone Saint, who was following Sunny's command, suddenly moved to the sides. Neffys, Castor, and Sunny braced themselves. Behind the improvised shield wall stood Cassie. She was holding a wooden staff in her hands, while an elegant rapier hovered in the air above her shoulder. The tip of the rapier pointed directly at the spiders. Asked how following the direction of the quiet dancer blade, Cassie moved her staff and activated its enchantment. Immediately, a powerful gust of hurricane wind slammed into the mass of the nightmare creatures, sending several of them reeling and throwing clouds of dust into the air. Of course, it wasn't strong enough to truly throw these abominations off their balance or damage them in any way. However, that wasn't the plan. Spiderkin of these creatures back on Earth had an unequally powerful sense of hearing. Which was rather strange, considering that they had organs that resembled ears at all. The truth of the matter was that spiders were able to feel the vibrations of sound waves. They were also masterful architects, using the vibrations in the specially created threads weaved into their webs to sense the movements of their prey from afar. These nightmare creatures were much the same. As powerful wind threw dust into the air and made every wire of every surrounding spiderweb vibrate all at once, they were momentarily disoriented. The members of the cohort were waiting for this exact moment. Instantly, they attacked with ferocious determination, spilling rivers of viscous black blood onto the ground. Sunny himself had already gotten his austere sword back, and now used its razor-sharp blade to get the beast that had forced him to retreat a couple of seconds ago. You have slain. By the time the iron spiders came back to their senses, their numbers were significantly diminished. But there were still so many of them. After that, the battlefield became consumed with chaos. There was no time for plans or tactics anymore. Every member of the cohort had to face off against multiple opponents, fighting with desperate resolve against enemies that surpassed them both in terms of personal power and numbers. Only the Stone Saint was calm and indifferent, moving through the ranks of the iron spiders like a graceful incarnation of pure darkness. The battle fell apart into several small pockets of fearsome violence. Kai was trying to support his companions from above, but with how intense the fighting got, he was having trouble finding the opportunities to take shots without risking hitting them. He was too afraid to take a risk, knowing all too well how harrowing the effects of the blood arrow were. Even the nightmare creatures of higher rank were doomed to succumb to a tortuous death after being wounded by the ghastly memory. Humans like them had no chance of surviving. For now, people on the ground were their own. Sunny was struggling against two ironclad abominations, gritting his teeth in exasperation. The damn bastards were too fast to reliably hit them in the gaps in armor and too damn powerful to face them directly. As a result, he was forced to constantly dance between the two of them, dodging the whirlwind of strikes that rained on him from all sides. Curses. Jumping back, he held the midnight shard with one hand and used another to throw the prowling thorn in the direction of the spiders. The creature easily dodged the kunai and continued its attack, threatening to slice Sunny Shan clean off. He had no choice but to retreat once again. Behind the menacing beast, the throwing dagger continued to spin. A few moments later, it cut a smooth arch in the air and flew back, as if turning into a boomerang. Sadly, just like the spiders back on Earth, these repulsive creatures had an almost absolute field of vision. The second spider simply moved its head down at the last moment without even bothering to turn it, dodging the heavy kunai that approached it from behind. But Sunny was never trying to wound the nightmare creatures with the prowling thorn, to begin with. Instead, he wanted to let them taste their own medicine. A moment later, the invisible string of his kunai drew taut, wrapped around two massive bodies. Just like prey used to be caught in their webs, the iron spiders were now caught by the invisible string of the prowling thorn, tripping over it and crashing into each other. Sunny dashed forward and let the midnight shard sing. The graceful blade flashed twice, sending two ugly spider heads spinning into the air. You have slain an awakened beast, Iron Spider. Your shadow grows stronger. Kicking one of the heads away, Sunny swiftly glanced around, searching for a new enemy. But there were none. Opening square bracket ... You have slain an awakened beast, Iron Spider. Your shadow grows stronger. You have received a memory. The gargantuan cocoon of steel spiderwebs was empty. Corpses of its previous inhabitants littered the ground, oozing with black blood. The cohort had cleared the entire nest full of awakened abominations. No matter how incredible, this was the undeniable truth. They had won. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 223 to 223, Natural Selection. 994 words. The danger was gone, so Sunny allowed himself to tiredly kneel on the ground, his breathing heavy and laborious. The strenuous battle against the host of spiders had not lasted long, but he was utterly exhausted. The intensity of these perilous minutes was enough to bring anyone down to their knees. Too weak. I am still too weak. With a heavy sigh, he summoned the runes and glanced at the number of shadow fragments. Shadow fragments, 362 1,000ths. Not bad. Clearing the nest had given him 22 fragments, 10 for the 5 iron spiders he had killed himself, and another 12 for those slain by the Shadow Saint. With the taciturn monster serving Ash's murderous bet, the speed with which Sunny was able to accumulate power was twice as fast, at least. If things continued like this, the Stone Saint was going to return his investment of 100 shadow fragments in a time. If I live long enough. With a grimace, Sunny dismissed the midnight shard and slowly got up. The sun was already rolling down toward the horizon, so he had to hurry with collecting soul shards from the corpses of the iron spiders. There were a lot of corpses. Cutting one of the beasts open with the prowling thorn, Sunny struggled with the idea that they had eviscerated this many nightmare creatures. Of course, he had expected this much. After all, Neffys and Sunny had been able to fight against 2 or 3 carapace scavengers back when it was only the 2 of them. Both of them were much weaker, less experienced, and barely equipped with memories back then, too. Now that they had spent 7 whole months in the dream realm, many times more than most sleepers ever had to, and tempered themselves against the perilous hellscape of the Forgotten Shore, both their skill and level of power had dramatically increased. Add the fact that there were 2 other powerhouses fighting alongside them, as well as Nightingale and the menacing Stone Saint, and the outcome of the battle ceased to be that surprising. And yet, observing the carnage that they had left in their wake still made Sunny doubt his eyes. These were awakened nightmare creatures, still. The real reason why the cohort had won did not lie in the individual prowess of its members, but in their ability to recuperate and control the battlefield. The iron spiders were powerful and deadly, but at the end of the day, they were still mindless beasts. Fancy they had allowed themselves to be surrounded and trapped. Had they been commanded by a creature of a higher class, one that was as cunning and smart as humans it faced, things would have turned out very differently. Sunny sighed. Come to think of it, the labyrinth was a curious place. It teemed with abominable creatures of all kinds, but almost all of them were of the mindless variety. The only 2 exceptions Heck knew about were the carapace demon and the spider matriarch, who had been either a devil or a durant. Perhaps it was just the nature of this place. Nothing too big and strong could escape from the flood of black water that drowned the world every night. Only comparatively small monsters were able to run away or hide, both from the dark sea itself and from the hungry terrors that inhabited it. These monsters were an almost insurmountable threat to those unfortunate young people who were sent to this forsaken hell by the spell, but by the standards of the Forgotten Shore itself, they were nothing but insects. A horde of parasites who fed on the crumbs left behind by the true masters of this place. What a depressing thought. This notion poured cold water on Sunny's pride over their achievement. Well, whatever. Soon, they were done with the gruesome job of fishing out the soul shards out of the dead spiders. While Neffys was dividing the spoils among the members of the cohort, Sunny used the chance to dive into his soul sea and inspect the memory he had received during the battle. It turned out to be cloak weaved from spider silk. Judging from the description, the cloak could provide him with a small amount of protection against physical attacks, simply by virtue of being very hard to pierce. Without thinking too much, Sunny fed the cloak to the Stone Saint. It was just a tier 1 memory, so no amount of protection it could provide would be of any help in this damned place. He would also rather kill himself than go into a battle while wearing a cloak. There were easier and less painful ways to do. Plus, it was white, didn't exactly go along with the dark gray fabric of the puppeteer's shard, not to mention being a hindrance to anything having to do with stealth. The stone saint absorbed another shadow fragment, at least. Receiving his share of the soul shards and entrusting them to Effie, who had more than enough space in her enchanted bag, Sunny glanced at Nephis. Changing Star was looking at the sun, calculating something in her head. After a few moments, she sighed and said, "We still have some time, let's explore the nest before ascending the statue." Sunny grinned. A sonomature explorer, this was exactly what he wanted to hear. The nest was formed by endless wires of the strange metal web and resembled a vast sphere. It was built around one of the legs of the stone colossus, effectively blocking the path to the bridge. The entrance was situated high above the ground, and extremely wide. Looking at the diameter of that hole gave Sunny an understanding of just how big the spider matriarch had been. Heshivard, the second lord of the castle, had been a very powerful individual. Sunny didn't even want to imagine what the battle with the giant arachnid must have looked like. Inside, it was dark and damp. Drops of black water were falling from above, creating an ominous melody. Peering into the darkness, Sunny suddenly stumbled and froze for a moment. This, he didn't expect. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 224 to 224, Pyre. 1,153 words. Inside the giant nest of spider webs, a desiccated corpse of the colossal matriarch lay shriveled on the floor, its iron carapace shattered by some devastating blow. The creature was long dead, but the sight of it was still terrifying. The vast abdomen of the brood mother, however, appeared to have been severed much later than her fatal battle against the lord of the bright castle. It almost looked as if it was torn apart from within. Inside the terrifying wound, Sunny noticed the shattered remnants off of giant, metallic eggs. The size of them was about the same as that of the 5 monstrous fallen beasts that had destroyed the original Stone Saint and her brethren back in the Dark City. So, that was where they came from. Looking away with Ashiver, Sunny noticed numerous cocoons of spider webs attached to the walls of the nest all around the dead matriarch. Inside them, withered carcasses of nightmare creatures of all shapes and sizes were preserved in strangely good condition. This was a true museum of terror. The nightmare creatures appeared asked how they were kept alive inside the cocoons for a long time before finally succumbing to death and turning into mummified corpses. Perhaps the abominable spiders stored them there for later consumption. Or, not. Noticing a few cocoons that had been broken open and what was inside of them, Sunny had to try hard to stop himself from vomiting. The iron spiders did not use the monsters caught in the cocoons for food. They used them as incubators. The creatures in the broken cocoons had been devoured from within. A few of them still had hundreds of small, moist eggs embedded into their flesh, with embryonic spiderlings moving weakly behind the slightly transparent shells. Curse, Eagle, damn these spiders, damn the labyrinth, damn the forgotten shore, and especially damn the damned nightmare spell that had brought him here. Sunny suddenly felt tired of this long, feverish, never-ending nightmare he had found himself in. But the worst was still to come. He was the first to notice it. With a dark grimace suddenly appearing on his face, Sunny called out Tohi's companions. Then, held them deeper into the nest, where, attached to the wall, hung a cocoon that was different from all the others. Because this one hid a raw silhouette of a human body. The 6 of them stood somberly around the cocoon, each consumed by their own dark thoughts. Finally, Nephis turned her head to Castor and said, "Can your sword cut it open?" With a short nod, the proud legacy summoned the enchanted Jian and took a step forward. Approaching the cocoon, Hess stopped and hesitated for a few moments. "Be careful." Glancing back at Changing Star, Castor lingered for a second, and then faced the cocoon with grim determination written on his face. Ghostly green light emanated from the blade of his sword. Hess won it with the graceful precision of an expert swordsman. The tip of the Jian cut through the metal wires of the cocoon, splitting it open. A shriveled human body fell to the floor, making the legacy jump back. Nephis, Castor, and Sunny stared at it, their faces pale and full of ghastly resentment. Then, Sunny bent over and emptied the contents of his stomach. This was just too much. The young man whose corpse they found in this harrowing place did not die an easy death. In fact, being eaten alive from the inside by hundreds of tiny nightmare creatures was probably the worst fate imaginable. At least Sunny couldn't think of anything worse. But even worse still, he recognized the dead sleeper. His face was strangely intact, with an expression of horrifying agony frozen on it forever. Despite the overall condition of the corpse, Sunny knew who it was just from one look. It was the young man who had attended the academy with them, the one who had called him a shorty when Sunny first approached Castor to create the impression that he was a boastful lunatic. Looking at their condition, Effie frowned. "Did you guys know him?" After a few moments of silence, Castor slowly nodded. "Yes, his name was Stephen. He was the youngest heir of the Pandavar clan." Stephen. Sunny had not even bothered to learn the name of this arrogant young man back when they were preparing to venture into the dream realm at the academy. In fact, he had really disliked him, and for good reason. But looking at the hideous, terrifying corpse in front of him, he had forgotten all about it. Sunny would never wish this fate on anyone, let alone one of his fellow students. Slowly, a solemn mood took over the cohort. They had already known that the other 3 sleepers sent to the Forgotten Shore this year never made it to the Dark City, which meant that they had perished somewhere in the labyrinth. However, finding one of them served as a stark reminder of how fragile their own lives were. Who knew what would happen to them in the future? If not today, death could be waiting for them tomorrow. Perhaps years from now, it would bet their corpses that someone would stumble upon by accident. Sometime later, Nephis gritted her teeth and turned away. Then, she said, her voice suppressed and hollow. "Ween to leave." The sun is setting. Her words broke the silence and brought everyone back from their grim reveries. Castor lingered for a few minutes, then spoke in a hesitant tone. Aren't we going to bury him?" Changing Star shook her head. "There's not enough time. I also don't want anyone touching the bodies infected with these eggs. It's too dangerous." The members of the cohort looked at each other. No one had a reasonable objection, but it felt wrong to just leave their fellow human here. Finally, Nephis sighed. A complicated expression appeared on her face, and then she said, "All right, go. I'll catch up with you guys later." Sunny stared at her for a few moments, and then slowly turned away. One after another, the 5 of them glanced at Changing Star and left, leaving her alone with the dead young man and numerous cocoons, each hiding as lame nightmare creature. As soon as last member of the cohort climbed out of the nest, a beam of pure radiance suddenly shot from the dark hole of its entrance, followed by a wave of scorching heat. The purifying fire unleashed by Changing Star engulfed the remains of their fellow student and then spread to the numerous cocoons, the nightmare creatures inside of them, and even the corpse of the spider matriarch herself. The insides of the nest turned into an incandescent, incinerating furnace. Everything inside of it was doomed to be annihilated and turned to ashes. A few minutes later, the whole structure was consumed by furious white flames. Nefis had escaped the burning nest shortly after the rest of her cohort, her face pale and tired. Leaving the grandiose funeral pyre behind, they began ascending the statue of the ancient warrior. The night was approaching. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 225 to 225, On the Shoulders of Giants. 1063 words. Once they climbed all the way to the broad shoulders of the statue and found a suitable place to make camp, everyone looked down without having to say anything. Far below them, the giant nest was still aflame. The cables that constituted it were melting and turning into rivers of liquid metal, flowing down from the edges into the vast abyss of the canyon. The turbulent black waters were rising from below to meet them. When the two streams met, one lightless, the other incandescent, billowing columns of hot vapor shot into the air. For a few moments, it seemed vast how light and darkness were on equal footing. But then the cursed sea rose from the depths of the canyon and azure and washed the brightness of melting iron away. The flood of blackness crashed into the burning nest, dousing it. A minute or so later, the white flames were gone. The surface of the dark sea continued to rise, asked how nothing had ever happened. Sunny sighed and turned to Nefis. Now that they had reached their goal, it was time to face the real danger. With a grim expression on his face, he hissed. So, now what? Heck knew the general concept of how she was planning to reach the southern edges of the Forgotten Shore in a short time, but not the details. Changing Star glanced at them, lingered for a moment, and then said. We're arrived at the canyon faster than I expected. There are still 2 days left before we can act. So, make yourself at home. We'll rest tomorrow and start preparing for it the next day. Sunny smiled. Rest, that sounded swell. Plus, Huey is centrally looking forward to making use of the, fast and comparatively safe, method of traveling through the labyrinth that Nefis had talked about. In fact, he would rather never have taught at all. Just like that, the cohort found itself with nothing to do for the next 2 days. Before leaving the Dark City, Changing Star had anticipated that various things could slow them down and padded the schedule of the expedition with extra time. Who knew that they would actually make it to the broken bridge so fast? In any case, Sunny wasn't complaining. He had a lot to do and think about. For example, the mysterious connection between his Tachi, Effie's spear, and the headless statues that stood around the Forgotten Shore. The statues represented the 7 valiant heroes that had made on oath to return light Totha's cursed land thousands of years ago. Sunny had seen 3 of them by now, the knight, the graceful woman, and now this mighty warrior. Did every statue have a connection with a specific memory? If so, what was that connection and why was Nefis so reluctant to share this information with everyone? Well, it wasn't like Han Changing Star were very close now. Sunny had drawn a clear line to denote the nature of their relationship himself. Han insisted that he was not a true member of the cohort, but merely a HIRED specialist. Why would she share her secret with him? This was a logical conclusion, but Sunny couldn't help but feel a bit resentful. Despite the fact that he was her first partner, now, the situation had changed. Nefis had other people totally on, like Castor. So would she say that Sunny was the only person she trusted on the Forgotten Shore except for Cassie, and then hide her technique from Castor? Everything felt so complicated. In any case, there was an invisible line drawn between the core members of the hunting party and the outsiders, Sunny and Kai. No one consciously avoided them, but it was clear that the line existed. When all was said and done, the 4 true members of the cohort preferred each other's company. Patsy, Sunny and Kai ended up spending a lot of time together, chatting about this and that and generally having honest time. Honestly, Sunny couldn't complain. As far as companions went, the charming archer was not the worst option. Plus, their conversations were extremely entertaining. Kai had a lot often stories about his life as a celebrity, while Sunny had plenty of macabre anecdotes about his life in the outskirts. Their life experiences were so vastly different that it was almost as if they were from different worlds. As a result, both felt like they were listening to fictional stories about some strange and fantastical land that they had never heard about before. Sunny spent the rest of his time training with the sword, trying to turn shadow dance from an ethereal concept into a practical set of core principles. The progress was painfully slow, but now there was progress, at least. He was having so much trouble because his chosen battle style was so strange and elusive. Unlike most styles, which started with certain movements and steps, this one was supposed to imitate any movement and any step instead of introducing its own. So it was more about the state of mind and the flexibility of his physical behavior. Sunny had to create a set of training exercises that would allow his body and muscle memory to become capable of adapting Tony's style and turn pliable like a shadow. Once the first day off training, his whole body ached. Despite his incredible physical shape and experience with tough training, Sunny ended up straining the muscles that he didn't even know he had, and forced those that had to know about to behave in a way that was utterly different from what they were used to. Actually, his previous training was even detrimental to the whole process. He had to make himself unlearn a lot of things to allow for this strange style to take root in his very bones. Thankfully, the foundation of his technique was Changing Star slowing style, which itself was designed for maximum adaptability. If Sunny learned another style or was further into mastering any existing technique, this would have been 10 times harder, if not impossible. Needless to say, his exercises were in a way similar to the beautiful and graceful dance he had seen in his dream. In fact, from the side, Sunny must have looked asked how he was having a seizure. He got more than one amused stare while practicing. It didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was that he was slowly pushing himself toward mastering the basics of shadow dance. And, hopefully, receiving his first relic. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report.